Chapter 643. What's the point of talking about those things that you don't understand? Tu Yu was annoyed by Du Lao's sarcasm. You won't understand even if I explain, so there's no need for me to waste my saliva. Du Lao spread his hands and raised his face as if he was looking down on Tu Yu. He was very familiar with this expression as it was always on her face. What can you bunch of useless people do? Tu Yu was infuriated by Du Lao's expression and shouted. The people around them didn't stop the two of them from arguing and looked like they were watching a good show. Ever since Du Lao and Su Ping entered the academy, they had drifted apart and weren't on the same path anymore. At least the salt you are eating now was produced by Yagué in the mountains. Du Lao laughed. That has nothing to do with you. I can only say that the gigolo is indeed capable. After being suppressed by Du Lao, Tu Yu's imposing manner immediately dropped. However, he gritted his teeth and said, that's all he's capable of. He can't even beat an ordinary person, let alone you bunch of useless people. Du Lao was annoyed by Tu Yu calling him useless people. With a livid face, he said, it's not up to you to say whether I'm useless or not. Great Xia isn't governed by a strong fist, but by a good brain. Yagui's martial arts aren't great, but he can do much more than people like you. We haven't done much yet, but our big guy is more useful than 100 of you. Du Lao stood up from his chair and said, let's go. Su Ping also stood up with a sneer and swaggered off with Du Lao. However, before the two of them could take 2 steps, the table behind them flew up with a bang and crashed into their backs. The food spilled all over the floor, and a lot of it landed on them. Huh, what can you two useless people do? Tu Yu sneered. You. Su Ping got up from the floor and glared at Tu Yu. What about me? The one with the biggest fist is the boss. This has been the case since ancient times. Tu Yu laughed and said, you are just useless people who have been abandoned. Do you really think you can learn anything from that gigolo? Su Ping, let's go. Du Lao suppressed his anger, glanced at Tu Yu, and pulled Su Ping away. By the way, Du Lao, you like Shijie, right? My father went to propose the day before yesterday, and her father also agreed. Tu Yu laughed loudly again. When Du Lao heard this, he stopped in his tracks and clenched his fists tightly. According to Great Xia, she and I are a well-matched match. How can a good-for-nothing like you be worthy of her? Tu Yu said from behind Du Lao. Tu Yu. Hong Xian shouted coldly. Hong Xian, this has nothing to do with you. This is between him and me. Wrong, it's a matter between me and Shijie. I'm just informing him that he can come and watch the ceremony. Tu Yu glanced at Hong Xian and said fearlessly. Furthermore, you don't seem to have any friendship with this trash, right? Humph. Hong Xian snorted coldly and didn't say anything else. Old Six, let's go. I'll accompany you to ask around. Su Ping pulled Du Lao along. What do you want to ask in my old wife's house? Tu Yu teased. Du Lao pursed his lips tightly and didn't look back as he walked down the stairs step by step. Su Ping followed him worriedly. You caused trouble for Du Lao today because of Shijie, right? I know that you like Shijie, but it doesn't matter if you cause trouble for him. However, if he hears what you said about the principal of the Black Bamboo Academy, you won't have a good time, someone said. Humph. It's just a few words of truth. What can he do to me? Tu Yu frowned and said forcefully. Let's go. Hong Xian got up and left, and a few people followed suit. I quite like what you said. Lu Ruoya patted Tu Yu's shoulder and hurriedly followed suit. Du Changkong's 2 cousins got up and left as well. More than a dozen people left one after another, and the second floor was suddenly half empty. Seeing this, the others felt that it was pointless and got up to leave. When the food was served, only Rinpochen and the Empress were left. Seeing that there was no one around, the Empress and Rinpochen removed their veils. "Are you angry?" the Empress asked. "It's not worth it." Rinpochen shook his head. In all fairness, it was impossible for him not to be angry when he saw his students being treated like this. On the contrary, he didn't care about the words that were said about him. However, after thinking about it carefully, the thoughts of these young people were probably the thoughts of most of the officials in the imperial court. After all, it wasn't easy to change decades or even centuries of knowledge. Their eyes and thoughts had long been blinded. Unless the Empress was personally impacted by modern technology and saw the future with her own eyes, how many people would be able to see it clearly? Even if new things entered their lives and changed their lives, many people would still carry on living with what they knew all along. In the end, they would be reduced to people who were eliminated. Not to mention now, many of the things that he did were only known by the Empress and a few people. Most people were unaware of it. There was still a long way to go. What he needed to do was to change this world bit by bit, change their lives, and let them accept the changes in this world. Then, they would choose to follow the times or be eliminated. There are many things that I know and understand. However, even the officials in the imperial court don't understand these things, let alone others. The Empress held Rinpochen's hand and said with a comforting voice, "I know." Rinpochen smiled. In fact, the impression that Du Laolu gave me in the past was that he was active but reckless. I didn't have high expectations of him. Today, I have a whole new level of respect for him. He actually knows how to use his brain and mouth. I thought you would be in a bad mood. After all, you have done a lot of things. The Empress looked at Rinpochen's face carefully and smiled. He didn't seem angry at all. "I'm not that childish and childish." Rinpochen grabbed the Empress's hand and used his fingertips to draw circles on the back of her hand. "They will naturally know after a few years. Your Majesty, my students are much more precious than them. I also have high hopes for them." The Empress nodded. "So, Your Majesty, can you bestow him a marriage or something?" Rinpochen asked. "You just said that you don't bicker with children." The Empress immediately withdrew her hand with a funny look on her face. "I was just saying." Rinpochen laughed. To grow up, one has to experience all kinds of things and have all kinds of insights. Just like this time, they should know what "time waits for no man" means. They should also know that they should work hard for themselves. In fact, from a certain perspective, I have to thank Tu. By the way, what's his relationship with Minister Tu? How would I know about this? The Empress asked casually. Rinpochen nodded and put this matter at the bottom of his heart. This time around, he wanted to play a good show where the Empress visited incognito and angrily punished the second generation of officials. In the end, he saw a dispute. The encounter of his two students made him understand the thoughts of many people, and it also made him feel a sense of urgency that time waited for no man. He couldn't possibly let his students go out with supercilious looks, could he? That would be because he was incompetent as the principal. After lunch, the two of them put on their veils and walked out of the restaurant to blend into the crowd. Before long, they heard Tong Jingye's loud voice, "Your Majesty. Why are you out of the palace today? Why are you still dressed like this?" They saw Tong Jingye sitting on a four-corned cow, looking in their direction with a surprised look on his face. The crowd was quiet at first, then followed his gaze and looked at the two of them. Soon after, there was an uproar. Rinpochen and the Empress's hearts skipped a beat. They actually met this guy when they came out for a stroll. "Your Majesty, didn't you bring any guards?" Tong Jingye jumped off his horse and walked toward the two of them, shouting as he walked. "Your Majesty is here. I actually saw Your Majesty." The corner of the Empress's eyes twitched, and she looked murderous. It wasn't easy for her to come out for a stroll, but it was ruined by this damned guy. I remember asking you to wait for me at Hanyuan Palace Hall a few days ago. Why didn't I see you when I woke up? The Empress asked coldly as she removed her veil. It's indeed your majesty. The surrounding crowd immediately surrounded the street and looked at the Empress with fanatical and worshipful eyes. The news of the Empress's appearance on the street was still spreading. Chapter 644. Finally, the Empress left with Renbachian from the roof beam. The emperor of a nation who came out to visit incognito ended up fleeing for her life. Of course, she didn't let Tong Jingye off the hook and kicked him out of the street. Tong Jingye crashed into a house and landed on another street. He lay there pondering for a long time before clapping his hands and understanding what the Empress was referring to. Renbachian. You tricked me. The Empress heard Tong Jingye shouting from afar and asked, what did you trick him into? I forgot. Renbachian replied. Oh. The Empress nodded and didn't ask any further. The two walked around the Baishur district for another half a day. While the other districts of Lan City were gradually desolate, this place that sold all kinds of weapons, farming tools, and ironware was much more lively. Thanks to the weapons left behind by the Great Xia army and the iron ore brought back from the Yun nation by the auxiliary army, the price of iron ore in Lan City had dropped, and the ironware market was much more prosperous than before. Renbachian even saw imitation manual fans here. It was the kind that he made in the beginning. He pulled it with a rope and it spun for a while. The blades of this kind of fan were made of wood and sold well at 1 tael of silver. The two then walked around the Shehu district. This used to be the largest trading place for animal hides, but it was now almost closed. Have you ever thought of selling something? The income of the national treasury is too low, and one has complained many times, the Empress asked as they walked. Although the salt produced by the Ministry of Works and the Ministry of Revenue can replenish the national treasury, the silver has been used to fill the previous deficit. Furthermore, the price of salt in Dayo is too high, and it's a huge burden on the people. In particular, as you said just now, the animal hides of the Aborigines have rotted, so there's naturally no income. Therefore, I want to reduce the price of salt by about half so that the people can afford it. Did someone tell Her Majesty about this? Renbachian smiled. I know what they are thinking, but they aren't wrong. This nation belongs to me, and you have to share some of my worries. That's why I came to ask you. Other people can have their own ideas and keep the good things in their hands, but I can't because I'm the Empress. You are my husband, so you can't do it either. The Empress said slowly. Of course, what Your Majesty wants to do is what I should do. Renbachian laughed. After that, the two of them found a place to sit down on the street. Renbachian pondered for a long time before saying, we should collect some fur. Why? The Empress was puzzled. Ever since the start of the war, the merchants of the 3 countries have disappeared. The fur of the mountain people cannot be sold and they have all rotted away. Naturally, the mountain people have no income. Without income, they naturally have no spending power. If they were to collect the furs now, it would give the mountain people some income. With this income, they could spend it in the city and purchase the necessities they needed to survive. Secondly, tanning furs required manpower and could increase the income of these people. At the same time, it could also improve the situation of some people. The money in the warehouse was just a number, but when it was circulated, it could stimulate the entire market and change the lives of many people. Finally, the price of furs is extremely low now. As long as we can find a market and sell the furs to Great Xia, we will be able to make a fortune. The Empress was a little confused when she heard what Renbachian said. Dayo's business model was very primitive and there were very few types of taxes. As a result, they didn't pay much attention to business. As Renbachian spoke, the Empress listened attentively. In any case, Rinpoche was better than her in this aspect. However, she was rather happy that the fur of the mountain people wouldn't rot away. Just like what Rinpoche said, at least this could solve some problems. This matter can only be done by you. If you want to take money from the national treasury, Tu Wan will go crazy, the Empress said. Naturally. Rinpoche nodded his head. If he wanted to marry the Empress, he would naturally have to take care of the mess in Deo. He didn't have any conflict in his heart at all. What they want is spices, right? Rinpoche muttered to himself. This thing is in the hands of your majesty, no one dares to touch it. However, if it is given to them, it will be planted in every household. With the current price of spices, as long as they have access to it, they won't let it go. And it is extremely easy for those ministers to get the seeds of spices from the Ministry of Works. At that time, the most likely outcome will be that all the farmland around Lon City will be filled with spices. Not only will the price of spices plummet, it will also affect the planting of grain crops. After a few years, when the situation has stabilized, I will give it to them. I can take out some other things, such as daily necessities like soap, cotton, and textile technology. As long as you think it's possible. The Empress put one hand on Rinpoche's shoulder, rested her chin on the back of her hand, and naughtily blew into Rinpoche's ear. She still remembered that every time Rinpoche came close to her ear and spoke, she would feel an itch from her ear all the way to her heart. Therefore, she wanted to see how Rinpoche would react. Ah! Rinpoche let out an exaggerated scream. He tilted his head and knocked it on the Empress's forehead. Humph! The Empress snorted and sat up straight. Rinpoche's scream was too exaggerated, and his acting wasn't good enough. Let's go back. The Empress said. Okay. The next day, Rinpoche went to the Ministry of Works and taught Tongzhinya how to make soap. Then, he helped Tongzhinya plan the construction of Deo's first soap factory. Following which, he started to hire workers, open a shop, and set up a leather processing factory on a piece of wasteland outside the city. After a period of time, a shop on Lon City's Jingyang Street put up a sign that said, "Buying furs." The shop had only been open for a few days, and it was already packed with aboriginals who heard the news. The furs that had been piled up for a long time and had even started to rot were transported into Lon City in large quantities. Then, they were weighed in the courtyard behind the shop. Yes, weighed. Ordinary furs were measured by caddies, just like collecting waste paper. The price was slightly lower than the price that the merchants from the three nations had paid, but this was enough to make the aboriginals ecstatic. After knowing that this shop had the backing of the imperial family, many people saw this as a good deed done by the Empress to show compassion for the people. After all, Deo didn't have the means of tanning furs. Furthermore, there was a war going on outside, and the trade routes were all cut off. The only reason why the Empress did this was because she pitied the people. In an instant, the Empress's reputation rose by another level. An emperor who could show compassion and treat the people well was enough to make the emperor loved and respected by the people. Moreover, the Empress was the strongest aboriginal. She could win battles and treat the people well, so she was the best emperor in the hearts of the people. During this period of time, there were some changes in the war in the Yun nation. First of all, the elephant soldiers appeared on the battlefield. This kind of thick-skinned behemoth reaped great results from the very beginning. Zidonglai used the elephant soldiers as the vanguard to attack the enemy and annihilated nearly 100,000 soldiers from the Yun nation in one battle. Of course, more than half of these elephant soldiers were lost in this battle. They could be said to have become consumables and were crippled in one battle. However, Zidonglai's goal was achieved. This battle directly reduced the available military strength of the Yun nation by half. Chapter 645. Shuiyang City, Yun Nation. In the backyard of an inconspicuous grocery store. This was originally a secret property of the Zhang family, but after a few people arrived half a month ago, the people from the Zhang family withdrew. At this moment, a man was standing there with his hands behind his back, looking at a map in front of him. Dayo's vanguard was hundreds of kilometers away from Shuoyang City, and there was Suyang City in the middle. A man walked behind the man and said, "Chief, Yang Jiao has gone missing." "Oh." The man turned around and asked, "What happened? When did he go missing?" This man was 50 to 60 years old, dressed in green, and had a dignified appearance. He was an old acquaintance of Rinpoche, the chief of the Golden Ring sect, Zhan Chongkong. He was one of the Baihu who had been transferred from Tianjing Basin to the Yun Nation. Yang Jiao said that he went to investigate the barracks last night and didn't come back. "I went to look for him but didn't find any traces," the man said. "Was he caught?" Zhan Chongkong frowned. "I think it might be." The man hesitated and didn't dare to speak. "What might it be?" Zhan Chongkong's face suddenly darkened. "He might have run away. I've felt that something was wrong with him these few days, as if he was preparing for something. Although he's not very skilled, he's smart and good at concealment. No one knows our background, so the possibility of him being caught is very small. Combined with his performance these days, I think the chances of him running away are higher. I've long felt that Yang Jiao is cold-hearted and unreliable." Another middle-aged man shouted after hearing this. "Is there still a chance to catch him?" Zhan Chongkong asked with an ugly expression. "If he left the city in the middle of the night, we won't be able to catch him now. After all, we don't have enough manpower," the man said. "Chief, it's fine if he runs away, but I'm afraid that he will tell on us. We can't stay here any longer. If he tells on us, the army will be here by now. However, to be on the safe side, we really can't stay here. Lu Dong, inform the previous contact and ask him to arrange another place to stay. Su Yi, inform the others to pack their things and temporarily evacuate. And you, go and look for Yang Jiao's whereabouts again. Perhaps he really met with an accident." Zhan Chongkong made the arrangements one by one. After making arrangements for everyone, Zhan Chongkong turned to the last man, whose face was wrapped in cloth and only revealed one eye, and said, "Ling Siquan, if Yang Jiao really ran away, do you think he would inform on us and sell us out?" "Sect Master, only you, me, and Lu Dong know about the contact. Even if he snitches, the Yun Nation will only know that we are a group of people. Just be more careful in the future," Ling Siquan, the outer sanctum deacon, said. During that scouting mission, he had brought up the rear for Zhan Chongkong. In the end, half of his face and one of his eyes had been chopped off, but he had come back alive. Zhan Chongkong and the others changed their residence and monitored it for a few days. Only when they realized that there were no movements did they feel slightly relieved. Although Yang Jiao had run away, he still had some camaraderie and did not betray all these people. However, at this moment, in the capital of the Yun Nation, Prime Minister, the guards of Xian City caught a person during their patrol. It is said that he came from Dayo, so they sent him here overnight. A scholar with a long beard, wearing a long gown and a square scarf on his head said. "Oh. From Dayo. The Aboriginals." The person who was addressed as Prime Minister was a man in his 50s or 60s. His figure was round, or rather, two spheres joined together. On the smaller sphere, there was a pair of small eyes shining brightly. He was the Prime Minister of the Yun Nation. Currently, he was angrily called a treacherous Prime Minister by the scholars in the city. He was the treacherous Prime Minister who controlled the imperial court, turned the emperor into a puppet, formed cliques for personal gain, blocked speech, and demoted people with different political views. Until now, he only cared about internal strife, Xing Qingmian. No, it is said that he came from Tianjing Basin. Furthermore, he said some things, the scholar said. What? Tianjin Basin was pacified by the Aboriginals half a year ago. What? Xing Qingmian was shocked. The Aboriginals have pacified Tianjin Basin for half a year. Yes, sir. That group of barbarians actually pacified Tianjin Basin for half a year, but they still act as if Tianjin Basin hasn't been pacified. Why do you think they are doing this? Xing Qingmian got up and walked a few steps in the room. Almost every step he took caused the flesh on his body to tremble. It could be said that his entire body was made up of fat. If the news of Tianjin Basin's pacification were to spread, Great Xia would definitely not send out their troops so easily. They only needed to face the Yun nation and the Qin nation. However, they concealed this news and acted as if the Protectorate of the South was implicated in the quagmire. Now, Great Xia has once again replaced their military strength with new recruits. They have gathered a total of 530,000 soldiers, but they are still concealing this news. I am guessing that their target is this Great Xia army. In other words, their target is Great Xia. That's right. This is what I guessed as well. Otherwise, there is no reason for them to firmly conceal this news unless their target is Great Xia. Xing Qingmian laughed heartily. After laughing, he looked at the middle-aged scholar and said, in that case, their attack on the Yun nation this time, just like before, it is for plundering. The barbarians don't know how to build and only know how to destroy. They don't know how to occupy and only know how to plunder, the middle-aged scholar said resolutely. I knew it. Since this is the case, the news of the barbarians pacifying Tianjin Basin can't be leaked. We have to drag Great Xia into this. Kill them. Yes. However, neither of them knew that there was another piece of information that the man didn't say. This time, the rearguard commandery had sent more than 400 people into the Yun nation to inquire about the situation in the various cities. The reason why he didn't say this wasn't because of their friendship, but because he wanted to use this information to save his life and even ask for a reward when he met the Yun nation's officials. However, it was this little thought that made him never have the chance to say this information again. This also made the two of them never have the chance to know this information again. Otherwise, they would definitely reconsider Dao's goal in attacking the Yun nation this time. However, the current information made them misjudge Dao's goal again. They continued to immerse themselves in internal strife and worked hard for a more important goal. To them, it was a good thing that some cities had been breached. Those warlords had their own armies, and it was difficult for the imperial court to govern them. This was a situation that had been formed since the establishment of the Yun nation. Originally, there was hope for this situation to be broken decades ago, but the emperor and the prime minister at that time were short-sighted and missed this opportunity. However, they wouldn't miss this opportunity again. Now that the cities had been breached, those warlords were either dead or had fled. Even after the barbarians retreated, their foundations had been swept clean. The imperial court could grasp all of those cities in its hands, and its control would be greatly enhanced. It could even create a centralized imperial court like Great Xia's. For the Yun nation, this was definitely more beneficial than detrimental. It could even be said that it would be a great contribution for generations to come. Chapter 646. The backyard of Black Bamboo Academy was bustling with activity every day. Classes were held in the morning, and in the afternoon, it became a workshop for the students. Every afternoon, there were endless sounds of smithing and arguments. At first, only the students from last year were busy here. Later on, it attracted some new students to watch from the side. The seniors were arguing over a drawing or discussing something with a blacksmith. However, whenever they wanted to ask what they were doing, the seniors would always say mysteriously, "You will know when the time comes. It will definitely shock you." Qing Lian was naturally attracted over. Every afternoon, she would sit in a corner and watch them busy. Although she didn't know what they were doing, her intuition told her that they were doing something interesting. Therefore, she watched as a huge thing gradually took shape amid the arguments. It was something she had never seen before. There was a row of wheels under an iron bucket that was placed horizontally. At this moment, she was sitting on the wall and watching them busy in the courtyard. From time to time, she would look down the wall and see Renbachien and a young girl sitting opposite each other. The young girl was about 15 or 16 years old. Her hair was simply tied up in a knot. It was a pity that her hair hung like a bird's nest at the back of her head. The young girl was wearing an animal skin tube top and a short skirt. Her exposed bronze-colored skin was full of health and wildness. The young girl was Zhuohua, and she had a confused look on her face. Renbachien pushed the chess piece back and said, "Only when a horse moves in the sun can an elephant move in the field." "Teacher, why?" Zhuohua looked up with a blank look on her face. "These are the rules. Everything in the world is under the rules. Heaven and earth have their own rules, society has its own rules, and chess has its own rules. Whatever we do has to be within the rules because each of us is a part of the rules. The smart way is to understand the rules and go with the flow. The stupid way is to shout that they want to go against the heavens and break the rules," Renbachien said slowly. "What if I kick over this chessboard now?" Zhuohua asked with a twinkle in her eyes, looking eager to try. "Then I won't play with you. Everyone is playing on the chessboard. If you kick over the chessboard, how can others play with you? The next time I see you, I will hide far away." Renbachien laughed. Qing Lian, who was sitting on the tree, fell into deep thought as she listened to this childish reply. Renbachien was right. Everyone was within the rules, and everyone was also a part of the rules. If he wanted to do something, he had to follow the rules. Even if the change of dynasties seemed to break the heavens, it was actually done according to the rules. The change of dynasties in the past had always caused the people to have no way of making a living. The people were filled with grievances, and in the end, the flames of war rose everywhere. In the end, the dynasty was destroyed. These were the rules. If a dynasty was at its peak and wanted to change dynasties, no one would support you, so you would definitely fail. Zhuohua patiently played chess with Renbachien. After he took a step, she quickly picked up a chess piece and placed it. Chess is the same as life. You need to see 10 moves before you can make a move. Because if he made a wrong move, he couldn't go back. The only difference is that you can restart a game of chess, but you can't in life. There's no chance to restart, Renbachien said after eating Zhuohua's chariot. Oh. Zhuohua scratched her head and quickly ate his cannon. Pfft. Qing Lian almost laughed out loud on the tree. Checkmate. Renbachien slapped the chessboard. People will always encounter all kinds of things in life. Many times, they will be blinded by the things in front of them, unable to see the danger behind them, and forget their goals. Therefore, you have to remind yourself at all times. You have to reflect on yourself 3 times a day. Renbachien threw the chess piece on the chessboard, stood up, and left. Zhuohua and Zhuowei looked at Renbachien's back with admiration. They felt that his words were very profound, and they couldn't understand what he was saying at all. After Renbachien left, Zhuohua turned to ask Zhuowei, "Why did teacher say all this?" "Because you are stupid." Before Zhuowei could answer, they heard Qing Lian chuckling from the top of the wall. Zhuohua immediately raised her head and looked up, her hand already touching the dagger at her waist. "Look, your muscles have grown into your brain. Besides fighting and killing, your brain is only filled with food, right?" What he meant was for you to use your brain more. There's no turning back in life. The more you use your brain, the less you will take the wrong path. However, I think he's playing the lute to a cow since you won't be able to remember it anyway. Qing Lian gently wiped her lips with her finger and smiled. Shuohua's finger slowly left the hilt of the dagger, but she wasn't angry. She raised her head and asked, "Are all scholars like teacher?" "There are many scholars in Great Xia, right?" "There are many scholars, but there aren't many like Principal Ren," Qing Lian replied seriously after thinking for a while. "There are all kinds of people, and scholars are the same. Most of them are like flies for personal gain or for fame. There aren't many who are truly broad-minded." Up until now, Qing Lian still remembered what Rinpoche once said, "Knowledge knows no boundaries." It was this sentence that completely reversed her impression of Rinpoche. "Is that why you came here to study?" Shuohua stood up and asked. "It's just a coincidence." Qing Lian smiled and said, "I came here for something else, but I'm very interested in the things that are being taught here." "Will you use these things in Great Xia and then attack us?" Shuohua looked at her with a burning gaze, pursed her lips, and looked very serious and solemn. It was as if she would slash Qing Lian with her dagger if she said yes. "No." Qing Lian shook her head and said, "Life is only 100 years, and mine is even shorter. Instead of thinking about it, I might as well think of a way to live longer. Then I won't hit you next time." Shuohua waved her hand, smiled heartily, turned around, and skipped away. Qing Lian sighed. Shuohua spoke as if she could beat her. However, this girl was really naive. Looking at the time, her book should have arrived by now, right? Hopefully, there wouldn't be any problems along the way. It wasn't a good feeling to owe others for their tuition fees. She swung her legs on the wall in a daze and only returned to the tavern in the evening. "Have you found the whereabouts of the person you were looking for?" Ning Kaichen asked with a smile after seeing her. "I stopped looking for him a long time ago. Anyway, it doesn't have much to do with me." Qing Lian put her hands behind her head and looked at the ceiling. "Someone came to look for you in the afternoon. When he saw that you weren't around, he said that he would come back at night," Ning Kaichen said. "Oh. What kind of person?" Qing Lian perked up upon hearing this. "He's from Great Xia and looks like he's injured. Help me peel the potatoes. I see that you carry a sword every day, so your swordsmanship must be very good. Just peel off the skin of these potatoes." Ning Kaichen placed 6 potatoes on the table. "Is it delicious?" "I've asked around. It can be fried, mixed with mashed potatoes, or used to stew meat. This will be it for tonight." "Oh." Qing Lian picked up the potatoes in her hand and looked at them. They were slightly bigger than a fist. She then unsheathed the long sword on her back. With a flash of the sword, the skin on the potatoes fell off in circles. "What a powerful swordsmanship." Ning Kaichen laughed. "It's all right." Qing Lian peeled the 6 potatoes and threw them to Ning Kaichen. Then, she took out the dictionary that Rinpoche gave her and flipped through it. After an hour, the tavern was filled with the strong aroma of stewed meat. It was much more fragrant than usual. "Ah, did you use spices, big sister?" After a while, the two of them sat at the table. In front of them was a pot of meat and potato stew, a plate of side dishes, and a pot of fruit wine. Chapter 647. Checkmate. Shuohua excitedly slapped the chessboard, sending sawdust flying all over the place. Renbachian's general and Zhuohua's horse turned into powder with this slap, and even a piece of the chessboard was missing. "Hey, I won, right? Teacher, you said that if I won, you would give me meat for a month, right?" Zhuohua held the chessboard with both hands and stared at Renbachian with bright eyes. "Where are the chess pieces?" Renbachian asked calmly. "Although the chess pieces are gone, I have checkmated." "How can you talk about winning or losing when you don't even have any chess pieces?" Renbachian laughed and swept the chess pieces aside. "Ah. Teacher, you are cheating. Zhuohua's eyes widened in anger. Remember, the more you are about to succeed, the more you have to be patient. Otherwise, it will be easy to fall short of success. Renbochin smiled at Zhuohua with tolerance, got up, and left. As Renbochin walked back, he stretched his back and thought to himself, I have to find someone else to play chess with next time. Zhuohua only played 2 games with me, and she didn't even think before she played. She just relied on her intuition to place the chess pieces and won. He hated playing with these cheats the most. Principal. Qing Lian caught up with him. What's the matter? Renbochin turned his head and asked doubtfully. Qing Lian threw an object wrapped in silk to Renbochin and said, I promised you. Renbochin reached out to catch it and knew that it was an animal hide scroll. He casually stuffed the scroll into his clothes, turned around, and waved before leaving. When he returned to Pingle Park, he saw Tian Tian and Gun Gun lying on the ground, snoring loudly. The listening machine was sitting on Gun Gun's head and digging out something from its fur. Renbochin initially thought that it was picking out lice, but he didn't expect it to take out a few dried fruits and stuff them into its mouth. It even threw one to Renbochin and winked at him. Is this a share for those who see it? Renbochin took the dried fruit, smelled it, and clenched it in his fist. It was better not to eat this thing because it had grown fur on it. Renbochin casually knocked on its head. After returning to his room, he took out the scroll and opened the silk wrapping it, revealing a very simple and unadorned booklet made of an unknown animal hide. This animal hide booklet gave him a very familiar feeling. It was simply too familiar. Because he had been reading the same animal skin book for an entire year, every word, every drawing, and every detail was engraved in his heart. He was so familiar with the feel of this animal hide that he could feel it just by touching it. No matter who touched the same beast skin for a year, they would not be unfamiliar with it. It can't be, right? Renbochin's heart skipped a beat. The Three visualization that he had obtained was a cultivation method that only allowed him to reach the Earth embryo realm. After reaching the Earth embryo realm, there was no information on how to enter the spirit world realm, let alone the contents of the spirit world realm. Therefore, he placed his hopes on the people on Earth. He first gave them ordinary martial arts, followed by intermediate martial arts. He hoped that with enough samples, he would one day be able to use a supercomputer to deduce the later parts of Rui visualization. As for this animal hide booklet, Qing Lian previously mentioned that it was the middle volume of the Ancient Scroll of Methods. It was a method to cultivate the spirit and was extremely useful for crossing the path to heaven and reaching the spirit world level. Could it be that this booklet and his Rui visualization came from the same source and were from the same set of martial arts? At the thought of this, Renbochin immediately flipped open the animal hide booklet and was greeted by 8 large words. The birth and destruction of the original body can give birth to all kinds of techniques. The 8 words were perfectly round and full of a sense of perfection. Renbochin's eyes were fixed on the words for a long time. In his eyes, these 8 words were constantly falling off, and new words were constantly being born and destroyed, repeating endlessly. Both of Renbochin's eyes were attracted to that page. He watched as countless perfectly round words were born and destroyed. After an unknown period of time, Renbochin felt a wave of fatigue and fell onto his bed. At the moment when Renbochin fell, the metal chain and the golden spear in his mind were ejected. The metal chain crawled on Renbochin's body like a snake and finally wrapped itself tightly around him. It was as if it was taking revenge for being ejected from Renbochin's sea of knowledge. After more than 4 hours, Renbochin slowly opened his eyes and felt dizzy. What happened? Renbochin wanted to get up, but he realized that he was tied up tightly and couldn't move. When he looked down carefully, he realized that the metal chain had actually tied him up like a dumpling. Let go. Renbochin reprimanded. Only then did the metal chain reluctantly release Renbochin. It plunged into Renbochen's forehead as if there was a void there. Renbochen sat up and touched the animal hide book in his hand. If he didn't guess wrongly, he had overexerted himself just now. This book was really scary. He was actually attracted by the words on the first page and couldn't break free. Eventually, he fainted. If he wasn't strong enough, he wouldn't even be able to read it. It seemed like he had to reach the earth will level before he could read this book. What made him extremely concerned was that the 8 words in the book were very similar to the words on visualization. They should have been written by the same person. It was a pity that he saw too little content. He didn't know if it was as he thought, that visualization was a cultivation method for consolidating one's foundation, and this book was an advanced method. As for the name of Ancient Scroll of Methods, it probably came from the last 2 words, 10,000 methods. Sir Ren, Her Majesty is calling for you. Qing Yuan knocked on the door and called out. Got it, wait for me for a moment. After Renbochen shouted, he took out visualization from the room and brought it along with another book to let the Empress take a look. Sir Ren, you don't look too good. Qing Yuan asked after seeing Renbochen come out. Just a small matter. Renbochen smiled. He still felt mentally tired, but he felt much better after a good night's sleep. Her Majesty asked about you twice in the afternoon. Qing Yuan covered her mouth and laughed. Renbochen followed Qing Yuan to the Empress's bedroom. Upon entering the room, he saw the Empress sitting there bored to death. There was a table in front of her with a steaming hot pot, cut meat, vegetables, and fruits on it. Your Majesty. Renbochen went forward to greet her. What are you holding? I heard that you didn't come out of your room after coming back. Why do you look so tired? The Empress looked at Renbochen suspiciously. Your Majesty, take a look. Is this book the same as visualization? I just took a look at it and fainted. Renbochen handed over the 2 books and smiled bitterly. Oh. Where did you get it? The Empress asked as she took the books and flipped through them. Renbochen told the Empress about the origins of the books. The Empress quickly flipped through visualization, then flipped open the animal hide book. She only saw the first page and said, the person who wrote this book is extraordinary. Even though I don't know calligraphy, I have seen some people who integrated their sword intent or saber intent into their words. Compared to this person, they are far inferior. Soon after, the Empress stopped talking and focused on reading the contents of the book. After a while, she put it down and raised her head, saying, You are really lucky that this book fell into your hands just like that. You guessed it right. This book and visualization are one and the same. One is a way to refine the body, and the other is a way to refine the mind. Furthermore, this set of martial arts is much more brilliant than I thought. Since you have practiced visualization before and have attained the earth will level, you can try to practice this set of martial arts. When that time comes, you will be able to cross the path to heaven and enter the spirit will level without any obstacles. Furthermore, the power of this set of martial arts can only be revealed after attaining the spirit will level. It is very brilliant. At this point, a smile appeared on the Empress's face. Now that Renbochen had obtained this set of martial arts, she wouldn't have to worry about his future cultivation. How brilliant is it? Renbochen immediately asked in high spirits. The Empress's words made all the worries in his heart vanish without a trace. It's very brilliant. It's as tall as a building. The Empress winked at Renbochen and actually revealed a mischievous expression. Renbochen was stunned and said, Your Majesty, there is something on your eyelashes. What? The Empress touched her eyelashes, raised her head, and asked, Are you lying to me again? Let me do it. Renbochen stretched out his fingers and touched her eyes. The Empress's eyelashes trembled slightly and allowed Renbochen's fingers to touch them. Chapter 648. Sir Tong, is the rubber here? Renbao had just heard that more than a dozen ox carts filled with wooden barrels had arrived at the Ministry of Works and rushed over just in time to see Tong Jingye and the ox carts filled with wooden barrels in the courtyard. Sir Ren, you came at the right time. Tong Jingye laughed. Take a look and see if this is what you want. I have something good to show you in a while. Renbao rubbed his palms, stepped forward, and opened the lid of a wooden barrel. It was filled with milky white rubber. Unlike the rubber that had been dried the last time, the rubber juice that was extracted this time was directly sealed in a wooden barrel before being transported to Lan City. This is it. Renbao smelled it and laughed. After waiting for so long, it was finally here. With this rubber, he could start making a lot of things. Send a cart of this rubber to Black Bamboo Academy and the rest to the Beast Park. Renbao made the arrangements before asking Tong Jingye, is the soap ready? I made a batch according to what you said. Since you are here, let's go take a look, Tong Jingye said with a smile. Soap was said to be expensive even in the Yun nation, let alone in Dayo. Very few people could afford it. However, he didn't expect it to be so easy to make. As long as one knew the production method, they could casually find a few people to make usable soap. Furthermore, according to Renbao's instructions, they added crushed flower petals to the soap so that it could be produced in several colors and had the fragrance of flower petals. It looked much better than the soap sold by the people of the Yun nation. This made Tong Jingye quite proud. Although the soap was made according to Renbao's instructions, it was also a credit to the Ministry of Works. One had to know that there were too few things in Dayo. Every time there was something that Dayo didn't have, he would feel excited. Renbao followed Tong Jingye out of the city and came to a newly built courtyard in the suburbs. The walls and the houses in the courtyard were all made of red bricks. Someone saw the two of them coming with their guards and immediately welcomed them inside. In a relatively large warehouse, Renbao saw the freshly made soap. According to Renbao, it was made from scented soap. This type of pancreas was made by grinding the pancreas of jumping sheep into powder, adding plant ash, animal fat, and mixing them into a thick paste. Then, it was mixed with flour powder and pressed into a block. Finally, it was placed on a rack to dry in the shade before being cut into pieces. When Renbao arrived at the warehouse, he saw a large piece of pancreas placed to one side. There was a water trough at the bottom of the shelf to guide the dripping liquid into a bucket. This liquid was a byproduct of making soap, glycerin. It was even more valuable than the soap itself. Glycerin can be made into nitroglycerin, diatomic manganese explosives, gelatinous explosives, and even smokeless gunpowder. Of course, he wasn't prepared to use such explosives, which were highly explosive, in a war. There were no secrets in the world that could be kept forever. The birth of explosives and gunpowder was a huge threat to the Aboriginals, who had a small population but were individually powerful. If explosives and gunpowder were developed, the advantage of the Aboriginals would be greatly reduced, and the disadvantage of having a small population would be obvious. Therefore, Renbao was prepared to keep this thing firmly in his hands. If explosives and gunpowder weren't a hurdle that couldn't be avoided in the development of science and technology, Renbao wouldn't want to manufacture them. Renbao walked around the warehouse and picked up a few pieces of soap that had already been cut. There were a total of 3 types of fragrances, and one of them was the Empress's favorite. The production was a little rough, but it was considered good for a start. Renbao asked someone to fetch a basin of water and washed his hands with the soap to check the effect. After confirming that there were no problems, he turned around and asked, Sir Tong, how much are you going to sell this soap? Sir Tong, how much are you going to sell this soap? Therefore, this thing has been manufactured, but the Empress still has to decide how to sell it. Renbao nodded slightly and threw the few pieces of soap to the guards behind him. Renbochin nodded slightly and threw the few pieces of soap to the guards behind him. Sir Tong, I will get someone to deal with this glycerin later, Renbochin said. The production of soap would inevitably produce a large amount of glycerin. Besides using a small amount as a solvent, the rest had to be disposed of elsewhere. He wasn't prepared to hand over such a thing to others. Is this thing still useful? Tong Jingye had wanted to ask about this for a long time. It's a little useful, but it's better not to use it. Renbochin waved his hand. Subsequently, the two of them went to the other warehouses to take a look. These warehouses were used to dry and grind pancreas, grind flours, and heat fat to make soap. There was also a large open space that was specially used to burn plant ash. Although the place wasn't small, there weren't many people, only a few dozen. You can print some patterns on the soap. Get a carpenter to make a few molds and print the patterns when pressing it. This will make it look more exquisite. Furthermore, the factory can be expanded. There are too few people now, and the production volume is too low. This thing is a consumable, and even if the factory is expanded 10 times, it can still be sold. If it doesn't work, we can find a way to sell it to Great Xia. Sir Ren, do you have a trade route to Great Xia? Tong Jingye asked. I'm in contact. Renbochin had already contacted Su Qing through Qing Lian. Later, he could also open up another route and send a caravan of the Jing tribe to Great Xia. However, within a year or two, there would definitely be internal strife in Great Xia. At that time, it was hard to say what the situation would be like. During times of chaos, non-essential goods like soap, glass, and silver mirrors would have limited sales. However, after conquering the Yun nation, it would be a good dumping ground. After visiting the soap factory, Renbochin returned to the palace and handed the few pieces of soap to the Empress. Your Majesty, these are made by the Ministry of Works. Soap. The Empress picked up a piece of soap and examined it. It was straight and angular, and there were traces of cutting on it. Not bad. I've tried it, and it's similar to what I expected. It's slightly better than the soap from the Yun nation. That's good. The Empress smiled. The days when all the goods were brought in by foreign caravans were gradually fading away. After that, Renbochin talked to the Empress about the production and sales of the soap. What do you think? The first thing the Empress thought of was to ask Renbochin. Set up a department of commerce that will be responsible for managing the factories and establishing sales channels. At the end of the year, a certain proportion will be handed over to the imperial court, and the remaining portion will be used to expand the factories, Renbochin said casually. Apart from you, I can't think of anyone else who can do it, the Empress said. I don't have the time, but I have an idea. Your Majesty, choose a department chief first and let the two shopkeepers from the caravan, Tang Feng and Gu Ziheng, be your assistants. Tang Feng and Gu Ziheng were both veterans in the caravan and had a certain understanding of this area. As assistants, they were capable enough. Now that there was only one soap factory, they could use it as practice. After they were familiar with it, the rest could be started. In the past, some of the things that the various departments needed were allocated internally. In the future, as long as the goods had characteristics, they could be classified under the Department of Commerce. The Ministry of Revenue would allocate funds to the various departments, and the various departments would then purchase from the Department of Commerce. After deducting the cost, the money would be handed over to the Ministry of Revenue in proportion. This way, everything would be on track, Renbochin said. This is the business model on Earth, right? However, by doing so, the Department of Commerce would have too much power in the future. The Empress held her chin and pondered. Although the Department of Commerce didn't have much in its hands now, the Empress knew that according to what Renbochin said, it would definitely become one of the most powerful departments in Dayo after it developed. At that time, it would be a separate department from the 6 departments of Dayo. Therefore, Your Majesty, you have to choose the candidate for the department chief carefully. Ability and loyalty are indispensable, Renbochin said. Chapter 649. After Renbochin and the Empress finished talking, the court continued to discuss the issue of the Department of Commerce for the next few days. On one hand, many people felt that the Department of Commerce was completely unnecessary. On the other hand, the Ministry of Works and the Ministry of Revenue both hoped to include the Department of Commerce in their respective areas. For the next few days, there were arguments in the court every day, and it was said that a lot of bricks were cleared from the hall every day. In the end, even Renbochin went into battle with a loudspeaker and used his volume to reason with the court officials. The Empress used force to ensure that these people would listen to Renbochin's reasoning. After arguing for 5 days, Renbochin and the Empress, who were superior in both volume and force, won. Finally, the matter of the Department of Commerce was settled. The Department of Commerce was directly responsible to the Empress, and Renbochin became the first minister of the Department of Commerce. There was another side effect, which was that the officials in the court had different degrees of tinnitus. The first thing Renbochin did was to find a courtyard in the city and decide on the location of the Department of Commerce. Before he could even summon Tang Feng and Gu Ziheng over, unexpectedly, someone came to join him. This was indeed beyond his expectations. When he left the academy, he was surprised to see that man outside the door and hear the purpose of his visit. Standing outside the door was a middle-aged man in a long gown. He was thin and weighed about 100 kilograms. When he saw Renbochin coming out of the academy, he cupped his hands and said, "Minister Ren, I'm Zhu Zhua, and I'm here to recommend myself." "Recommend myself?" Renbochin repeated before opening his mouth. "May I invite Minister Ren to come in?" Zhu Zhua asked. "Come in and talk." Renbochin waved his hand and asked him to follow him into the academy. He was curious about what this person could say. After all, it was quite rare for someone to recommend themselves to be his subordinate. Furthermore, this person had come looking for him right after his appointment. He was really well informed. He wondered if this person had anything that caught his eye. Renbochin sat in a chair with his arms folded and sized him up. He looked like someone from the Yun Nation or Great Xia. He looked like a scholar, unlike the typical aboriginals who were full of wildness. "Speak." "Sir Ren, to tell you the truth, I'm currently serving as the Minister of Agriculture and Livestock. It's really rash of me to recommend myself. However, I have always been fascinated by what Principal Ren has done. I have heard about the iron mine at Mount Damo and other things. Now that I've heard that Sir Ren is establishing the Department of Commerce, I feel that I can be of some use to you. Hence, I'm taking the liberty to recommend myself. I have traveled in the Yun Nation for many years." Zhu Zhua's words moved Renbochin. He didn't expect it to be a turtle. Since he was able to become a minister-counselor, he must have the ability. He had traveled in the Yun Nation for many years, so he had some knowledge. Subsequently, Renbochin asked Zhu Zhua a few questions. Even though Zhu Zhua's answers weren't completely satisfactory to Renbochin, this was because Renbochin had seen all kinds of business models on Earth and had high standards. In this world, it was impossible to find someone who could completely satisfy him in terms of business. In reality, Zhu Zhua's experience and way of thinking were much better than the average aboriginals. "You go back first. I'll think about it." At this moment, Renbochin was very tempted. However, he didn't show any expression and simply asked the other party to go back. "Yes, Sir Ren. I shall take my leave then." Zhu Zhua cupped his fists and left without any hesitation. This made Renbochin think highly of him. After Zhu Zhua left, Renbochin shook his head and said, "I didn't expect there to be such a person in the Ministry of Works. It's such a waste to leave him in the Department of Agriculture and Livestock. That afternoon, Renbachien got someone to investigate Zhu Zhua. He then asked the Empress for an appointment to transfer him from the Department of Agriculture and Livestock and promoted him to the Director of the Department of Commerce to be his assistant. Subsequently, Tang Feng and Gu Ziheng, the two former shopkeepers of the caravan, were transferred to the Department of Commerce as minister counselors. The two of them were promoted from shopkeepers of the caravan to secondary class, rank 5 minister counselors. It could be said that they had reached heaven in a single bound, so they were naturally very grateful to Renbachien. After that, Renbachien transferred some people from the Ministry of Works and the Ministry of Revenue to be the backbone of the Department of Commerce. He then asked the rearguard commandery to find some experienced businessmen in Tianjing Basin and send them to Lan City. In some ways, these profit-driven businessmen were much more useful than the officials from the Ministry of Works and the Ministry of Revenue. Renbachien divided the Department of Commerce into 3 parts. They were responsible for factories, trade routes, and financial planning. The 3 parts were completely separated. In this way, when the Department of Commerce was promoted to the Ministry of Commerce, it could be divided into 3 departments. This way, the framework would be set. After that, Renbachien became a hands-off shopkeeper. He set the direction and threw the rest to others. He was preparing for another matter at the school, which was the hot air balloon. Li Fu's ascension to immortality depended on it. After all, the materials in this world weren't at the level of those on Earth, and there weren't any products like nylon cloth. Renbachien simply chose to use 2 layers of coarse cloth that were strong enough and brushed a layer of rubber in the middle to increase the density and reduce air permeability. As for the fuel, Renbachien chose coal and a type of wood that could burn for a long time. Renbachien estimated that such a hot air balloon should be able to take Li Fu up 10,000 to 15,000 meters. As for the heat control valve, there was none at all. How was Li Fu going to come down after he went up? Renbachien simply didn't consider this problem. At most, he would prepare another piece of cloth for him and let him jump down while dragging the 4 corners. In any case, with his strength, he shouldn't fall to his death. If he fell to his death, the Empress would naturally become the 3rd most powerful person in the world. Ever since Li Fu saw Renbachien release the Kong Ming lantern during the New Year, he had been studying how the Kong Ming lantern flew and whether it could take him to the sky. For this matter, he had looked for Renbachien many times, but Renbachien had always pushed him away with the excuse of materials. At this moment, when he heard Renbachien say that he wanted to make a hot air balloon to send him to the sky, Li Fu immediately couldn't hold back. For a full 200 years, he had been searching for a way to ascend to the sky. After he had searched all the places that were rumored to be haunted by deities and ghosts, the hot air balloon had become his greatest hope. Even though Renbachien had repeatedly told him that the current hot air balloon could only reach a certain height, he was still elated. It was just like how he felt when he saw his fiancée when he was young. In his eyes, it was good to be closer to the sky. Even if he couldn't touch it, he could at least see a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, he would be able to see the deities in the sky. This #1 person in the world, who kicked people's balls whenever he had nothing better to do, had never left the academy since the materials were sent there. After figuring out how to make this hot air balloon, he became the supervisor. Every day, he would watch as the people brushed a layer of rubber liquid on the cloth and pressed 2 pieces of cloth together to stitch them together. Every day, he would check if there were any problems with the finished cloth. If there were any mistakes, he would fly into a rage. Every day, he would take the blueprint and repeatedly compare it with Renbachien, asking him about the various obstacles, and Renbachien was never tired of it. As the area of the stitched cloth grew larger and larger, a ball made of cloth and animal tendons was gradually completed. Li Fu finally calmed down. Half a month later, the hot air balloon was finally completed. Hey, you are going to ascend to the sky the day after tomorrow. Shouldn't you teach me your God's finger? If you fall to your death, you will be brought to the coffin. Renbocchen stood in the courtyard and looked at the hot air balloon with the slogans, "One world, one dream, if the heart is there, the dream is there," and "I want to fly to the sky and stand shoulder to shoulder with the sun," as he patted Li Fu. Chapter 650. On Earth, there were 365 days a year, but in this world, there were only 30 days in a month and 360 days in a year. On February 30th, year 72 of the Dao calendar, this world's first hot air balloon is about to bring an angry Hulk to conquer the sky, a deep voice said from the sidelines. "Sir, what's a Hulk?" The official who was taking notes looked up with a puzzled expression. "You don't have to know what it is, just write according to what I say." In addition to carrying an angry Hulk, this hot air balloon also carries the thousands of years of mankind's dream of flying into the sky. It also marks the beginning of mankind's exploration of the sky, Renbocchen continued. "What exactly is a Hulk?" the Empress asked from behind Renbocchen. "The Hulk represents power." Renbocchen replied. "It's just a metaphor." The Empress looked at Renbocchen suspiciously. She felt that he was lying again. "Tell me, how much of what you said to me back then was true and how much was false?" the Empress suddenly asked. "With your Majesty's wisdom and intelligence, how can I hide anything from you?" Renbocchen laughed. The Empress snorted softly and brushed aside this sudden thought. At this moment, everyone was at the plaza in front of the palace. Besides the Empress, there were also the court officials, students from Black Bamboo Academy, and many family members of officials watching from afar. In the middle of the plaza was a hot air balloon that was being prepared. There was no thermal control equipment or any protective equipment. There was only a hot air balloon and a bamboo basket below it. On top of the basket was a large stove. As the coal and firewood in the stove burned, the hot air balloon gradually expanded and began to rise from the ground with the bamboo basket below it. "One world, one dream." Tu Wan read each word as she looked at the words that were completely revealed as the balloon expanded. Immediately, someone ran to the side to see what was written in other directions. "If the heart is there, the dream is there, I want to fly to the sky and stand shoulder to shoulder with the sun." These words are very imposing, and I like them very much. Qin Chuan laughed. Although they were suppressed by Renbocchen and the Empress with both volume and force, these people didn't hold a grudge against them. The Aboriginals were mostly straightforward people. Unless they had really offended someone, like how Renbocchen had offended young Sparrow Hawk back then, they wouldn't care about small disputes. "Can this thing fly?" Qin Chuan moved closer to Renbocchen and asked. "Of course you can. You'll be able to see it soon. If this thing can fly, then can it bring soldiers into enemy cities?" Qin Chuan asked. Then, they were shot down by an arrow and fell to their deaths. Before Renbocchen could say anything, Tong Jingye had already said this and looked at Qin Chuan with a mocking expression. "Keep quiet," the Empress said coldly. The two of them immediately stopped talking, glared at each other, and stood on either side of each other. "Senior, it's almost done. Remember, if you fall, you must spread that piece of cloth as soon as possible to increase resistance and slow down the speed." Renbocchen stepped forward and patted Li Fu. In fact, there was no need to use an if, it should be an affirmative. "I know. According to what you said, this thing can't go all the way to the sky, but it's good to be closer to the sky. I want to go up and see for myself." Li Fu wasn't as crazy as he was a few days ago and had completely calmed down. "Well, the materials aren't up to standard yet, but we can make better ones in the future." Renbocchen nodded. However, Renbocchen knew that it would be useless even if he made a modern hot air balloon. The rise of a hot air balloon depended entirely on the buoyancy of the air. After reaching a certain height, the air would become thinner, and even the best technology wouldn't be able to make a hot air balloon reach the level of a rocket. "That's all right," I'll go up and take a look. Li Fu said as he watched the hot air balloon slowly rise. Use coal first and then molten wood when you reach a certain height. The flame of molten wood is bigger and will allow you to fly higher, Renbochin reminded him again. I know. Alright, I'm going up. Li Fu waved his hand and then jumped into the bamboo basket on the hot air balloon. As Li Fu broke the rope on the hot air balloon, it began to slowly rise into the sky. There was an immediate burst of exclamations around the venue. The fact that it could actually fly was an extremely shocking thing for most people. On the other hand, the students from the Black Bamboo Academy were proud because they knew the principles and production methods of this thing. Seeing the shocked expressions of the others made them feel extremely carefree. Many of the Zhang family's craftsmen were also dumbfounded as they watched this scene. They had no idea how this was done. As the hot air balloon flew higher and higher, the entire city could see this huge flying object. Look, something is flying, someone shouted as he pointed to the sky. In just a moment, a group of people stood beside him and looked up at the sky. What's that? It looks so weird. There are words written on it. What are they written? I want to fly to the sky and stand side by side with the sun. Someone with good eyesight identified the words one by one. This thing is going to fly to the sun. Everyone exclaimed after hearing this. Soon, the hot air balloon flew higher and higher under everyone's gaze until it became a small dot. Then, a gust of wind blew past. The hot air balloon was blown away in front of everyone's eyes. Everyone looked at the hot air balloon that quickly disappeared in the sky and looked at Renbochin in unison. Renbochin stroked his chin and said, "The sky is like the sea. It's an area that humans rarely set foot in and is full of all kinds of opportunities and dangers. Can he still come back?" Renbochin put his hand on his head to block the sun and looked into the distance. The fuel is only enough to burn for less than 2 hours. It shouldn't fly too far, right? Renbochin turned to the Empress and said, "Your Majesty, let's go back." After the two of them returned to the palace, everyone else dispersed. Those who needed to go back to handle official business did so, those who needed to go back to make clocks and watches, and those who needed to go back to make locomotives. However, for the children of the officials and commoners, such a huge thing flying into the sky was still something that they could discuss for a long time. No matter which world, people were extremely enthusiastic about the dream of flying in the sky. I heard that something flew into the sky in front of the palace today. Qing Lian was asked by Ning Kaichin as soon as she returned to the tavern. Yes. Qing Lian nodded. Until now, she still felt that this thing was very powerful and interesting. If she had the chance, she also wanted to ride that thing into the sky to see what it looked like. What's that? How did you do it? It's called a hot air balloon. I saw how it was made, but it's a little troublesome to gather the materials, Qing Lian said. It would be great if I could also go up to the sky to take a look, Ning Kaichin said with some yearning. I heard that that thing is going to fly to the sun. The sun is so hot, will it catch fire? Ning Kaichin asked again. Qing Lian was stunned. She really hadn't considered this question. There were many such discussions in the city. This hot air balloon didn't have much technical content in Renbochin's eyes, but many people felt that it was very powerful. It was simply too powerful to be able to take people into the sky. The reputation of the Black Bamboo Academy also took this opportunity to spread throughout Lan City. Chapter 651. Shanghai. In a bar at the corner of the street, it was filled with beer bottles, drinks, cooked food, and pizzas. It looked no different from any other bar, except for the tightly shut door. There were more than a dozen people either standing or sitting in the bar. Some of them were Chinese, while others were blonde foreigners. Some were holding a glass of beer, some were playing with a handheld game. and some were playing with a dagger. Their faces were either calm or relaxed. There was no sign that they were having a party. Everyone, according to the results of our investigation, the thing we want is in that house. One of the men with blonde hair and blue eyes lowered the volume of the speaker and clapped a few times to attract everyone's attention. Steve, do you see those people in the yard? They can use a car as a gym equipment. They can break a tree with one punch. God, are they really human? I even suspect that a superhero from a movie has come to life. Another person said in an exaggerated tone. The people around him ignored him, because he had said this more than once. Andy, that's why we're here. The order from above is to get what we want from them no matter what, Steve said. Yes, strength doesn't mean strength. It also requires skill and flexibility. There's a saying in Hua Nation, speed is the only unbeatable martial art. I like this saying. Guns are the fastest. A bronze-skinned woman stuck the dagger in her hand on the table and said, "This is not an easy task. Those people are not just strong, you can tell from their movements. And they're not just one person, there are more than a dozen of them. The most important thing is the location. This is not some small country, it's Hua Nation, one of the most dangerous countries in the world. I hate carrying out missions in this country," another bald man said. "This is a mission, everyone, please remember your identity," Steve raised his voice to remind them. "They do look strange, but that's why we're here." According to the information obtained by the CIA, the owner of the house has a laboratory under his name, and on the surface, he's doing drug research. In reality, he's doing some biochemical research on the human body, and there's been considerable results. These things have already been obtained by Hua Nation, and they're making biochemical soldiers. It was obvious that there was no way we could steal those things from Hua, and this person was the best way to do so. Our mission is to get the information he has, and if possible, take the owner of the room with us. Steve took out various photos and blueprints from a folder and threw them on the table. The photo at the top was of a sturdy man in his 20s. The second photo was of a woman in red with a cold expression. This man is our target. Let's call him Mole. This woman, whose identity was unknown, was his girlfriend. They have been in the room for a long time. I believe that there is a basement in the house. The thing we want and our target are most likely in the basement. This is the blueprint of the room. The location of the basement is likely to be here and here. Also, note that the food they transport every day is enough to feed 200 people. Therefore, we have reason to believe that there is another laboratory underground, and there are many people or experimental materials inside. Stephen tapped twice on the map. Do you have any other questions? Stephen looked at everyone and answered a few more questions. Seeing that no one had any questions, he said, "Now let me make the arrangements. This is point 1. There will be surveillance during the day, and they are likely to be Hua Nation's agents. They will leave after 10 at night. However, we still have to keep an eye on this place. If they are discovered, Kobe and Robin will be responsible for dealing with them. This is point 2, the target's entrance. There are no surveillance devices in the entire courtyard, and no dogs, so we can sneak in directly. This are point 3 and 4, respectively. Team 1 and Team 2 will sneak in from these 2 points. According to our observations, most of them will drink after 8 at night, and end at 10 at night. Their vigilance is very low. Our attack time is at 12 at night, just after the Hua Nation agents change shifts. Let's get rid of those 2 first before attacking. This is their power system. Negan, you are responsible for cutting it off, and Sarah will be responsible for blocking the signal. After cutting off the power, Team 1 will break in from the front, and Team 2 will break in from the back. Team 3 will prevent anyone from escaping. We have to clean up in 5 minutes. We have 1 hour to get all the information and retreat. This is the attack route for each team. Take a look. This mission is very important. Only success is allowed, no failure is allowed. Also, this is the retreat route. Everyone must remember it. After we succeed, a speedboat will pick us up, and we will arrive in the open sea in 4 hours. If everything goes well, we can disappear from everyone's sight before they can react, Steve arranged. Everyone picked up a piece of paper from the table. On it were architectural blueprints and their mission. Steve, where are the weapons? Have they been delivered? Yes, they have. This operation's code name is Whack-a-Mole. Boss, they don't look right. They might be about to make a move. Should we make a move? In a restaurant not far away, a man asked through a walkie-talkie. No, there's no need to make a move. We can use this opportunity to see how they deal with firearms. A middle-aged man's voice came from the other end of the walkie-talkie. At night, a dozen fully armed people split up into groups and walked to Shishan. Soon, a voice came from the walkie-talkie, Thunder God, point 1 is empty. Steve heard it and said, check the surroundings. If there's no problem, go straight to point 3. Soon, the group arrived at points 3 and 4 without a hitch. The lights in the villa had already been turned off, and it was pitch black. Steve looked at his watch, and after confirming that it was almost time, he put on the infrared night vision goggles. Everything in the darkness immediately became clear. Thunder God, this is the President. We have succeeded. Negan's voice came from the earpiece. Just in time. Steve looked at the time on his watch and thought to himself. Hopefully, everything went smoothly. After this mission, he could be transferred back to the headquarters. Team 1 has arrived at the main entrance. Team 2 has arrived at the back door. When Team 1 kicked open the door, they smelled the strong smell of alcohol. After rushing in and seeing the people lying on the sofa and the floor, they did not hesitate at all and immediately raised their rifles. However, the moment the flames shot out, the huge men who were lying on the floor jumped up with agility that did not match their bodies. Enemy attack, kill. War Bear roared. His eyes were like bronze bells, and he crossed the distance of 7 to 8 meters like lightning. His fist whistled through the air as it smashed into a man's head. His head instantly exploded like a smashed watermelon. At the same time, he swept his leg across the chest of another person, and that person was instantly plastered to the wall. His entire chest caved in, as if he had been hit by a car. When he finished off 2 people, the other 2 people who had rushed in were also finished off. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. Almost at the moment when the gun was fired, everyone jumped up from the ground. The kill was already completed. The 4 people of Team 1 did not even make a sound before they were smashed into pieces like tofu. At this moment, the 4 people of Team 2 had just rushed in from the back window, and they were greeted by more than 10 man-bears who were drunk but full of killing intent. Team 1, what's the situation? Team 1. Team 1, report back. Team 2. Team 2. What exactly happened? Steve was still calling out to the 2 teams outside. Just now, he only heard a few gunshots with silencers and the sound of collisions coming from his earphones, and then everything went silent. At this moment, 5 or 6 men walked out of the door that had been smashed open. They looked up and looked around, then jumped away at an amazing speed. One of them went straight to Steve, while the others went to other places where there were people. Like superheroes in the movies, the 5 or 6 people jumped dozens of meters and almost reached Steve's head in one jump. This scene made Steve's eyes pop out. No, this is impossible. Steve rolled on the ground and at the same time raised his hand to shoot into the air. However, The man just crossed his arms in front of him to protect his vital parts. As blood bloomed on the man's body, a big foot stepped on Steve's chest. Chapter 652. Ha, you were actually injured. Idiot. Xiongning was ridiculed when he returned to the villa with a body full of bullet holes and a tattered corpse. I just wanted to see how powerful this thing is. Xiongning retorted. Then why didn't you stick your head out for him to hit? Su Wei mocked. Why do you have so much nonsense? Xiongning glared at him. Just as Su Wei retorted, he saw a few others dragging corpses back. Xiongning wasn't the only one injured. Have you seen this thing before? Xiongzhan understood the situation and looked at Xiongning suspiciously. I've seen it before, but I haven't tried it myself. I have to know what it is like to have an idea. This thing is quite fast, but it's not very powerful. Xiongning smacked his lips. Who else wants to try? Su Wei picked up an MP5K and gestured around. Me. Someone immediately jumped up excitedly. Su Wei raised his hand and pressed the trigger. He accurately aimed at the side of the body and shot a row of holes in the television behind him. There are no more bullets. How do I reload this thing? Su Wei lowered his head and fiddled with it for a long time, but he still couldn't figure out how to reload it. The little guy should know, right? Give him a call. The little guy referred to Ding Jia, who was thin and small. Even though he practiced martial arts frequently and ate the meat that Rinpochen brought back from Dayo, his body was only slightly stronger. Let me do it. The other winged cavalry warrior was elated. His favorite thing to do was to make phone calls. What he did the most every day was to call various service hotlines and chat with the receptionists about all sorts of trivial matters. These should have bullets. Someone kicked some guns over. Just now, many people lost their lives without firing a single shot. The difference between an earth will expert and an ordinary person was too great, even for a specially trained agent. Moreover, the winged cavalry warriors were much stronger than ordinary earth will experts. Su Wei lowered his head, picked up a gun, and fired in a random direction. Immediately, two men rushed over to grab the bullets in the air. Two more holes appeared on the palms of the two winged cavalry warriors as the bullets were lodged in their bones. It's even faster than the repeating crossbows of Great Xiao's crossbow battalion. Then, there was a series of gunshots in the room. A bunch of people took those strange guns and fiddled with them. Some people even used their eyes to see what was inside the gun barrel. Fortunately, there was no misfire. Otherwise, if they died in such a way, they would be laughed at. By the time they were done, the walls and furniture in the room were filled with bullet holes. When they started to study the stun grenades on the corpses, the people from the Messier 87 department finally arrived. The leader was Yang Sr. 7 or 8 cars stopped in front of the door. When he arrived, he found that the door was open. I am from the Messier 87 department. Your boss knows me, and you should have met me before, Yongsan shouted from outside the door. In the room, the winged cavalry warriors who were studying the grenades looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with, "Who are we?" The boss doesn't know, but the lady boss is quite familiar with them. Just ask them why they're here, Xiongning said as he tossed the grenade up and down. Come in. When they arrived, they saw the corpses piled up together, bullet holes everywhere, and the room full of injured people. They were indifferently fiddling with stun grenades. This scene gave Yongsan a fright. According to the data obtained, these people shouldn't pose too much of a threat, even if they launched a sneak attack in the middle of the night. After all, the physical state of these humanoid monsters was too terrifying. However, when they arrived, they discovered that 11 of the 16 people in the room were actually injured. What was strange was that other than 2 people who were injured in the arms, the rest were injured in the hands. This made them wonder how they did it. "Where's your boss?" Yang Sen asked. "He's not here. I knew that someone was going to attack you, so I rushed over, but I was still a step too late. Fortunately, nothing serious happened. Do you need a doctor to come over for your injuries?" "Injuries? What kind of injury?" Everyone looked at him with bright eyes. "How could there be any injury? Your arm is still bleeding. Do you want to bandage it?" Yang Sen pointed at Xionging and asked. Xionging lowered his head to take a look. Then, the muscles on his arm bulged, and a bullet that was missed just now was squeezed out by him. It fell to the ground with a thud, and without any treatment, the bleeding immediately stopped. This scene made Yang Sen and the others' eyes twitch. Yang Sen pointed at the corpses and said, "These people are foreign agents. We have to bring their corpses back and investigate their origins. These are ours." Many of the winged cavalry warriors glared at him. There were actually people in this world who dared to snatch their things. Even if they didn't deliberately release their aura, it still made Yang Sen and the others feel as if there were more than 10 humanoid beasts in front of them. It was as if they would become food for these beasts at any time. Even though it was summer, it still made everyone feel cold from head to toe. "These are corpses," Yang Sen explained. "They are also ours." Xionging pointed at the corpses, guns, and ammunition on the ground and said, "They are all ours. My father taught me since young that whoever wants to snatch my things, I will kill him. If I want to snatch someone's things, I will kill him first." Although his voice was flat, it was full of ferocity. His eyes, which were like those of a ferocious beast, gave off a bone-chilling glow. The first sentence was fine, but the second sentence was beyond the bounds of earth. However, Yang Sen didn't doubt the authenticity of these words at all. Although he hadn't dealt with them much, from the information he had obtained, these people were like this. They were cruel, violent, and full of savagery. Yang Sen didn't want to have a conflict with this group of fellows. He changed the topic and asked, "When is your boss coming back?" "I don't know. It's such a hot day. If we don't deal with these corpses, they will rot and stink. In that case, let's dig a hole and bury them. Can we take a look here then? We have to know the identity of these people who attacked you and see if we can find any clues. After that, I will get someone to send you some freezers and put the corpses in them," Yang Sen said helplessly. It seemed like it was easier to talk to him. "All right. Send some wine along the way." This time, the winged cavalry warriors agreed happily. "And pig head meat. And pork knuckles and trotters. Send a roasted pig over." Yang Sen's eyes twitched when he heard this. What did this group of people think they were doing? Delivering food. After that, a group of people busily arranged the corpses into 360 poses and took pictures. The corpses looked like the scene of a car accident. All of them had been hit by a huge force, causing their bones and internal organs to shatter. They were all killed in one blow, and some of them were even decapitated. Everyone knew that it was done by those men next to them and that they were like Ultraman, but they were still speechless. More than a dozen armed elite agents were killed in a short period of time in a surprise attack in the middle of the night. It was really terrifying to see them completely wiped out. Soon after, the wine was delivered. The winged cavalry warriors rolled up their sleeves and happily drank while playing with the bees. Little bee. Pow! Boom! This game of playing with the bees made the eyes of all the people from the Messier 87 twitch and their foreheads break out in cold sweat. When Ding Jia arrived, he saw many unidentified people turning over the corpses. More than a dozen men were drinking and playing finger-guessing games, and someone was sent flying and smashing into the wall at any time. Chapter 653. As for whether flying above the sun would catch on fire, this topic mysteriously swept through half of Lan City. Even Feng Ho specifically came over to ask Renbaqian if it would catch on fire. We won't be able to reach the sun. Why? Will it catch on fire if it does? It will catch fire. Why is it on fire? The sun is a big fireball, just like a torch. Why do you think it's on fire? Why don't you try putting your finger in the fire? If you can't light your fingers, they'll burn. The sun is a big ball of fire. What does the sun keep burning? Why is the sun burning? Do you have 100,000 whys? Renbaqian realized that he wouldn't be able to explain it clearly to Feng Ho. You don't know. Feng Ho had a look of disdain on his face. If you don't know, then say it. Renbaqian almost vomited blood. The sun is made up of the simplest elements such as hydrogen and helium, which convert the pressure of the sun's magnetic field into light and heat. What is a kiss? What is helium? What is a magnetic field? What was conversion? Why didn't the sun go out? Did you know that? Do you know or not? If you don't know, just say you don't know. I'll ask someone else. Renbaqian was immediately infuriated. Why didn't he realize that Feng Ho had such a cheap mouth in the past? How could he be doubted by this fellow? If he didn't know, who else would know? This was intolerable. Renbaqian spent the whole afternoon explaining to Feng Ho that the sun converted hydrogen and helium into light and heat. The converted light and heat were then converted into pressure in the form of a magnetic field. The hydrogen and helium then converted the pressure into light and heat. In this way, the energy repeatedly changed from one form to another, maintaining the same total energy, which was the conservation of energy. Do you understand? Renbaqian had already drunk 3 big cups of tea. There was a crowd of students outside the classroom listening to Renbaqian's lecture. I don't understand. It's too troublesome. Forget it. If you don't understand, then you don't understand. Feng Ho shook his head and walked away with a calm expression. Renbaqian almost spat out another mouthful of blood. Why did I bother with you all afternoon? Ha! I drank 3 cups of tea and chatted with you for the whole afternoon, and you just walked away like that. At that time, Renbaqian felt like he had been f***ed. Soon, the court officials no longer pondered the problem of how to find the sun at night. Less than 2 days later, something else attracted their attention. It was a clock that was 2 meters tall and half a meter wide. A quarter of the top was the dial and the bottom was the pendulum. The case is made entirely of wood, and the outside of the dial and pendulum are inlaid with glass. When this was presented to the royal court, it immediately attracted everyone's attention. Especially after knowing that the function of this thing was to measure time, and that it was much more accurate than a sundial and didn't have as many restrictions as a sundial, this thing that could accurately measure time immediately made everyone fall in love with it. A group of people gathered around to study it. The 12 numbers on it represent 24 hours, right? Tu Wan asked as she stroked the glass on the dial. Her eyes were almost glued to the glass. How does this thing walk on its own? Shui Yan was also curious. With this thing, time will be much more accurate in the future. Shi Qing stroked his beard and nodded. The Empress was sitting on the throne, allowing them to study the pendulum clock. She looked very happy. She liked this pendulum clock very much. It was the first pendulum clock in the world, and it was perfect for her collection. In addition, this was also made by Renbaqian. She now enjoyed seeing the surprised expressions of these people after he made all kinds of things. However, at this moment, she heard a cracking sound coming from the crowd. The Empress's happy expression immediately froze. Crack. Crack. Hua! The crowd dispersed with a whoosh, leaving behind the dumbfounded Lian Liang of the War Division and the half-broken pendulum clock. Drag him away and hang him on the city wall, the Empress said coldly. It's not. It's not me. Lian Liang wanted to cry but had no tears. He turned to look at his superior, Qin Chuan, who was looking up at the sky. Then, he looked at Shi Qing, who was looking down at his heart. Then, he looked at Zhui Yan, who was studying his palm print with his head lowered. If it's not you, who is it? The Empress's cold gaze swept across everyone. Everyone looked at Lian Liang in unison, and the meaning in their eyes was very clear. It's you. Sir Lian, confess. Tai Yan said leisurely. Lian Liang opened his mouth for a long time and was almost angered to death by this group of people. He didn't use any strength at all just now. There were so many people touching him just now. How did it become like this? When Renbochin returned to the palace, he saw Lian Liang, who was hanging on the city wall, fluttering in the wind. He stood outside the palace and looked at him for a long time, not knowing who did it. This method of binding was really fascinating. They actually used tortoiseshell to tie Lian Liang up. For some reason, Renbochin suddenly thought of the Yangqing Lake hairy crabs when he looked at Lian Liang, who was tied up and hung on the city wall. After thinking about it carefully, he had never seen crabs in Dao and didn't know if there were any. The ingredients in this world were much better than those on Earth. It seemed like in the future, besides searching for various resources, he would also have to find ingredients. Renbochin returned to the palace while thinking about it. Sir Ren. Lian Liang's expression changed a few times as he called out to Renbochin, who was sizing him up from afar and lowering his head in deep thought. Renbochin stopped and looked up with a smile. Official Lian, what's the matter? Lian Liang pondered for a long time. Should he let Renbochin put in a good word for him or should he just stand here? Thinking about it carefully, Her Majesty couldn't hang him up for too long, and there was no need for Renbochin to plead for him. He still owed Renbochin one. I want to say that the scenery here is very good. Lian Liang tried his best to raise his head and pretend that the scenery here was unique. His bald head shone under the sunlight. Renbochin originally thought that Lian Liang would ask him to put in a good word for her to be released. In the end, Renbochin was stunned when he heard what Lian Liang said. In that case, I shall not disturb Sir Lian any further. Renbochin cupped his fists at Lian Liang, who was in the air. I'll look at it for a while more. Lian Liang nodded. Renbochin wanted to laugh, but he kept a straight face. Your Majesty, what did Sir Lian do? Renbochin asked as he entered the palace. Here. The Empress sat cross-legged on the couch without a care for her image. In front of her was a laptop that was emitting the sound of a game. Upon hearing Renbochin's words, he raised his head and raised his chin. It was only then that Renbochin noticed the broken pendulum clock at the side. It had only been a day, or rather, half a day, and it had already become like this. The Aboriginals were indeed experts at demolishing things. The speed at which they dismantled was really fast. Was it done by Sir Lian? Renbochin was dumbfounded. I saw Sir Lian just now, and he said that the scenery up there is very good. Chapter 654. Renbochin and the Empress didn't return to Earth with 2 people, but 3. In addition to Renbochin and the Empress, there was also a cold-looking lady in metal armor, Xianjia. Renbochin originally thought that if this young lady with poor eyesight was nearsighted, he would just give her a pair of glasses. However, based on his online research, Renbochin discovered that she had a congenital weakness and slight astigmatism. As such, he had no choice but to bring her back to Earth for a hospital. Xianzhi was shocked for a moment before calming down from the palace of Deo to the villa on earth. She squinted her eyes and observed her surroundings. In fact, she already had all kinds of speculations about the Empress's frequent disappearances and those strange things. Now, she finally knew where the Empress went after her disappearance. There are people downstairs. Xianzhi squinted her eyes and said. There are 16 winged cavalry warriors, and there are others. Can you feel them? Renbaqian asked curiously. Xianzhi glanced at Renbaqian, turned her head to the side, and said, I can feel some of them. The aura of the winged cavalry warriors was very special. In addition to their Kismet heaven strength, they also had a very strong murderous aura and a violent aura. In addition, there were 11 other people. They were very weak and were about the same level as a 4 or 5-year-old child. Oh, I will get you some clothes to change into later. Renbaqian nodded and didn't care too much. It was very normal for there to be people downstairs. Go and find some clothes for her. The Empress said lightly and went back to her room to change her clothes. Why do I need to change? Xianzhi asked coldly after the Empress left. Because you can't meet people with these clothes. Just change when I ask you to. You will understand after you go out and observe for yourself. Renbaqian muttered to himself. Where did he have women's clothes? However, seeing that Xianzhi was only slightly shorter than him, Renbaqian opened his wardrobe and found a white shirt that he hadn't worn since he bought it. He also found a pair of jeans. Wear it like this. Renbaqian picked it up and demonstrated to Xianzhi. Xianzhi's body was covered with iron armor that was connected by rivets. It went from her abdomen to her shoulders and around her neck. Only her arms and the area above her neck were exposed. Below the waist, there was an iron skirt made of iron leaves. The length of the skirt reached above the knees, and it made a rustling sound when she walked. After seeing Renbaqian demonstrate how to put on her clothes, Xianzhi's expression didn't change at all as she took off her armor. She raised her hands, twisted her body, and the armor on her upper body fell to the ground. His naked upper body was exposed. His skin was as smooth as jade. Perhaps it was because he hadn't seen the sun for a long time, but his skin was almost white. His plump chest stood erect, bewitching and captivating. In addition to that cold but extremely beautiful face, there were not many men who could control themselves in front of her. Renbaqian glanced at her and sighed in admiration. Her figure was really indescribable. It was usually hidden under the armor and was much better than Lin Chaola's flat figure. However, he did not expect that she was not wearing anything underneath and did not even try to avoid it. Before Renbaqian could say anything, Xianzhi took off her battle skirt. Fortunately, she was still wearing a pair of safety pants inside. As aboriginals mostly wore short skirts and often climbed high and low, safety pants were standard equipment. It wasn't like ancient China, where skirts were directly naked underneath. Renbaqian threw the clothes to Xianzhi, thought for a while, and threw a t-shirt to her. Put it on inside. Then, he changed his clothes. Since a woman like her didn't even try to avoid it, what was there to be afraid of? After Renbaqian changed, he turned to see that Xianzhi was buttoning her shirt. The shirt and pants were a little baggy on her, but Xianzhi didn't mind. To her, beauty and ugliness didn't seem to matter. Follow me down. Talk less and look more, Renbaqian said. Understood. Xianzhi nodded. She was originally a person of few words, and it was even more so in this completely unfamiliar place. Let your hair down. When Renbaqian walked to Xianzhi's side, he casually pulled out a hairpin from her hair. Xianzhi moved her fingers, but she didn't stop him and allowed him to pull out the hairpin. As the hairpin was pulled out, her hair immediately fell down, just like Sadako's. Renbaqian nodded. This didn't look so out of place anymore. When he brought Axiange to the staircase, Renbachian felt that something was wrong because the staircase handrail was damaged in several places, as if it had been scratched by something. He looked down and saw a lot of bloodstains on the floor. Did something happen? Renbachian's heart skipped a beat. What could happen to the villa? The nation couldn't do anything, and there were people watching at all times. It was impossible for thieves to sneak in, just like what happened to the Jean family in Shiqing. What could have happened? This bunch of idiots weren't satisfied with the little bee anymore and developed a new game. Renbachian quickly walked downstairs, looked into the living room, and was stunned. He saw that the living room was in a mess. The floor was covered in blood, and a row of freezers had appeared in the corner of the room. As for the winged cavalry warriors, they were either lying on the sofa or sleeping on the floor. What happened? Renbachian quickly walked into the living room and looked around. There were many holes in the walls and furniture. These were bullet holes, and he was very familiar with them. Boss. Ding Jia, who was sleeping in the corner, suddenly stood up and swallowed the word mother that he almost blurted out. What happened? Renbachian asked with a frown. It seems like someone launched a sneak attack last night. Ding Jia thought for a long time before coming up with the word sneak attack. Although this was indeed the case, it still made him feel a little weird. In particular, when he saw the guns all over the floor last night, he felt like he was watching a blockbuster movie. However, when he thought about how these mountain kids could use cars as barbells, Ding Jia felt that the movies nowadays were too low class. Sneak attack. Who are they? Renbachian turned around and found the guns, grenades, and stun grenades on the floor beside the sofa. His frown deepened. Was this a war? Who could mobilize so many people in the country? It's said that they are foreign agents. The corpses are in the freezer. Ding Jia said. Boss, you seem to have been targeted. Some people came last night and said that they are from the Messier 87 department. They are now outside. Following which, Ding Jia looked at Axiange, who had followed Renbachian downstairs without saying a word. He marveled at her beauty and marveled at the fact that the lady boss was indeed the lady boss. The woman from before was the boss, but who was this? At the same time, he wondered why the boss came downstairs without knowing anything about what happened last night. However, he swallowed all the words he wanted to say. Renbachian frowned and kicked each of the winged cavalry warriors who reeked of alcohol. He then walked over to open the freezer and saw the corpses inside. Each freezer contained 2 corpses. There were a total of 8 freezers, and there were 16 corpses. Nearly half of them were Caucasians. There were also a few blacks, South Americans, and 3 people who looked Chinese. My situation has been leaked. Renbachian immediately realized the problem. There were 16 of them, 16 fully armed agents. There was no other explanation other than his own situation being leaked. Lady Boss. General Axiange. I almost couldn't recognize her without her armor. More than a dozen winged cavalry warriors got up from the ground and were surprised to see Axiange like this. It would be great if they could snatch her home and make her their wife. Unfortunately, they couldn't beat her. Tell me what happened last night. Renbachian said with a frown. Oh, I was sleeping. Suddenly, a few bugs rushed in, and then I killed them. A few small bugs. How did they turn the house into this? Renbachian looked around. There were more than a dozen winged cavalry warriors, but they actually turned the house into this. One by one. Did you just stand there and watch them shoot at the house? How is that possible? It was Su Wei. This group of people immediately betrayed Su Wei. However, Su Wei looked proud and said, "This bunch of idiots are inexperienced. I showed them a gun. However, this thing is quite fun. Ren Baqian's face twitched. The living room was now in ruins with bullet holes everywhere. The TV, air conditioner, and decorations were all broken. You actually did this. Chapter 655. Oh. Ren Baqian has appeared. And there's an unknown woman beside him. Someone is coming down the mountain. How many people? What's their purpose? I got it. Keep an eye on them. I'll head over now. Yang Sen hung up the phone and hurried downstairs to Shi Mountain. When he was about to reach the foot of Shi Mountain, he glanced to the side and suddenly shouted, "Stop the car." The driver quickly stopped the car. Yang Sen rolled down the window and looked outside. He saw two bear-like men, who were 1.75 to 1.8 meters tall, swaggering into the main entrance of a hotel. Although he wasn't familiar with these two men, he had seen their photos many times. In fact, most of the people on the mountain had this kind of build. Coupled with their bald heads that reflected the sunlight, he could even recognize them just by looking at their backs. What are they doing here? Just as this thought emerged in Yang Sen's mind, he saw the two men swagger to the flagpole at the entrance of the hotel. They placed their hands on the flagpole, pressed down, and broke the white steel flagpole that was more than 10 centimeters thick. Originally, their looks and figures were rather frightening. Naturally, they attracted a lot of attention when they entered the hotel. The security guard, who was about to step forward to question them, was so frightened that he stopped in his tracks. Then, the two of them carried a flagpole each and ran away. They didn't go through the main entrance, but carried the flagpoles that were more than 10 meters tall, jumped over the wall, and ran away with the wind. Everyone at the entrance of the hotel was dumbfounded by the shocking scene just now. There was also a group of tourists who had just gotten off the bus, and their eyes widened when they saw this scene. Oh my God! Gasps were heard one after another. There were originally 3 flagpoles, but now there was only one left standing there alone. Someone pushed it with a look of disbelief. This thing really wasn't made of straw. Soon after, Yang Sen's phone rang. I saw what happened. You guys go and settle it. I'll go up the mountain. Yang Sen picked up the phone and said as he watched the two people disappear into the distance. This speed is at least 60 miles per hour. The driver looked at the two people in front of him and couldn't help but exclaim at the same time. This wasn't a car, it was a person. 60 kilometers in an hour, 1 kilometer in a minute, and 100 meters in 6 seconds. Even a flying person wouldn't be that fast. Moreover, the two of them had maintained the same speed and had run at least 1 kilometer. Follow him, Yang Sen said. 100 meters in 6 seconds. If it was just a few hundred meters or a few hundred meters, it would still be acceptable, even if it had already broken the world record. But to maintain the same speed for a few kilometers, or even run all the way to the villa, was too scary. This meant that the other party's explosive speed far exceeded this speed, possibly reaching 100 meters in 3 seconds, 2 seconds, or even 1 second. This speed was too terrifying. Was this the strength of the soldiers in the blessed enclave? Even if they were elite soldiers, this level of strength was too terrifying. From the very beginning, Yang Sen knew that the other party was a soldier. After all, he could tell at a glance from the aura of having gone through hundreds of battles. He just didn't know what level the other party was at. He had used the detector to observe these people. The power contained in their bodies was about the level of 30 to 40 elite special forces in the country, and the value was between 1,000 to 1,300. They were almost like miniature Hulks. And at this moment, it seemed that in terms of speed, they didn't have any shortcomings. In a place with complicated terrain, fighting with enemies with such speed was simply a disaster. In a second or two, they could reach you from 100 meters away. Unless you opened up a distance in an open area, the opponent wouldn't be able to react. In places with complicated environments like cities, most of the time, the distance was only a few dozen meters, a dozen meters, or even a few meters. It could be said that before you could react, the other party had already reached you and killed you with a punch. These people didn't even need weapons. Their bodies were extremely powerful weapons. No wonder those two people hadn't been caught in the Southern Dynasty. In the end, it was the two people who followed them who found them. No wonder those special agents died in such a short time. Then the question was, what was up with the bullet holes on their bodies? He didn't think that those special agents could injure so many people at such a short distance, even if they were fully armed and holding weapons. Yang Sen sat in a car far behind the two people. Occasionally, there would be cars passing by, and the drivers were all dumbfounded. These two people carrying a white steel flagpole ran faster than a car. When Yang Sen arrived outside the villa, the flagpole inside was already set up. On the ground in the middle of the villa, the two people stuck the flagpole into the ground more than 2 meters deep. Yang Sen was also sure that those people could indeed travel long distances at this speed. From the hotel to here, it was at least 5 or 6 kilometers. The two people didn't slow down at all and seemed to still have energy to spare. However, he didn't have the time to think about this as he was attracted by the situation in the courtyard. He stood there with more than a dozen people. There was also a big man who was tied up and tied to a rope on the flagpole. Behind them, Qi Zixiao, who was dressed in red, stood there with her arms crossed and a cold look on her face. Around her were the members of the Messier 87 department who stayed here to watch. "Raise the flag," he said as he stood in front of the dozen people. Then, a familiar sound of music rang out. "Arise, slaves who are cold and hungry. Arise, the suffering people of the world. Our blood is boiling, and we must fight for the truth. The old world has been utterly defeated. Arise, slaves. Don't say that we have nothing. We want to be the masters of the world. F***CK. The onlookers from the Messier 87 department were shocked when they heard this music. What were they doing? The Internationale? Or was it the Tang Dynasty version? Raise the flag. What are you waiting for? Raise it slowly. There must be a sense of ceremony and solemnity. Ren Baqin said to the woman who was wearing baggy jeans and a white shirt under the flagpole. Learn from me and salute. Whoosh. More than a dozen people imitated Ren Baqin, raised their arms, and pointed their palms to their temples. They gloated as they watched the big man, who was tied up and had a wooden ball stuffed in his mouth, rise with the music. Float with the wind. Flutter in the wind, F***CK. The people from the Messier 87 department were even more shocked. How could they do this? They wanted to shout 666. Yang Sen, who was in the distance, almost spat out his saliva. What were they doing? They ran to the hotel at the foot of the mountain to snatch 2 flagpoles and scared the hell out of everyone just to raise a flag. It was to raise a person. The ceremony is over. Ren Baqin retracted his hand. Only then did the people behind him put their hands down. Many of them felt that it was fun and raised their hands again and again. Mr. Ren, what are you? Yang Sen quickly stepped forward and asked. Chapter 656. Ren Baqin entered the room, opened a freezer, pointed at the corpses inside, and asked, "What's going on?" Some of these people have been lurking in the country for a long time. Some of them have been in the country since 10 years ago. If not for this incident, I'm afraid they wouldn't have revealed themselves. There are also some people who entered the country under various pretenses. Their identities seem normal on the surface, but that's just on the surface. We already have some clues about their real identities. They should be from the CIA, Yang Sin said. Why are they targeting me? Ren Baqian continued to ask. Yang Sin pondered for a while and said, your information may have been exposed. The other party should know something related to you, but they don't know much. That's why they carried out this operation, which isn't considered weak, but isn't considered strong either. This is also related to their fear of our country. If there are more people, they will definitely be exposed. Of course, if they know everything, they will achieve their goal no matter what price they have to pay. Therefore, I guess they only know that it's related to you and aren't very clear about the specifics. In other words, there's a traitor among your people. We are currently looking for the reason for the leak. I suggest you strengthen the defenses here, such as surveillance equipment. I don't see any of that here, but I can arrange it if you need it. In addition, we will pay more attention to this place in the future. Yang Sin didn't mention anything about putting their people in charge of security. Although he wanted to, he knew that the other party didn't need it. With these burly men here, even if they attacked with the military, they might not be able to take down this place. Especially after being bullied by these people. They couldn't mobilize the military either. This was China, not the United States. Will they have any ideas about my family? Ren Baqian asked. I will strengthen the protection of your family, Yang Sin said. Thank you. Ren Baqian cupped his fists to express his gratitude. In fact, this matter didn't make him too worried. He knew better than anyone else the lethality of these winged cavalry warriors. What these winged cavalry warriors lacked was their understanding of firearms. As long as they were familiar with them, no one would be their match in a complicated environment like Shishan. If 16 wasn't enough, 32 would be enough. At most, he would bring some experts back. As long as the other party didn't use large-scale weapons of mass destruction, they wouldn't be a threat. Ren Baqian invited Yang Sin to sit down and chat for a while before sending him off along with the freezers that were filled with corpses. As for who had leaked the news, he did not care. The country was more concerned about this than he was. Ren Baqian and the Empress sat on the sofa and were somewhat speechless. Every time they came back, they would first watch the news. In the end, they didn't even have to watch the television this time. Let that idiot hang on the flagpole for 3 days to refresh his memory. Shenfeng will come over in a while. Then, she'll see what she needs to buy. She'll probably only be able to return to her original appearance by nightfall. Go out for a walk. It's perfect for Xianzhe's glasses. All right. The Empress nodded. Xianzhe, on the other hand, had a calm look on her face. It was as if what the two of them were talking about had nothing to do with her. She didn't even know what glasses were. The Empress sat in the front passenger seat while Xianzhe sat in the back. The moment the car started moving, Xianzhe's expression, which had always been like an ancient well, finally changed. This thing is actually alive. That's right. Ren Baqian let go of the steering wheel. And it's a female. Then are we in the stomach? Xianzhe was in a daze. Ren Baqian pressed the horn. It was as if this steel monster was responding to Xianzhe's question with a roar. Why aren't you controlling the direction? The Empress was slightly puzzled as she watched Ren Baqian's hands leave the steering wheel, yet the car continued to move forward on its own. I just bought this. It's an intelligent driving system, and I can finally free my hands. Ren Baqian smiled as he extended his hand. Xianzhe's face was like an ancient well, but her eyes followed his hand as it moved. Slap. That hand was slapped away by the Empress. Ren Baqian took a deep breath. His hand, which hadn't been slapped for a long time, was swollen again. For the rest of the journey, Xianzhe, who came to Earth for the first time, was very calm. It wasn't until they reached the city that she said, "This looks like a jungle. A steel jungle." Ren Baqin nodded. A steel jungle. Hearing these words, Xianzhe perked up. She squinted her eyes and looked outside, but unfortunately, she couldn't see anything clearly. She could only see that there were many towering pillars in the surroundings. In addition, she saw some of the monsters that she and the others were riding on galloping on both sides. It's even more stable than the mountain-gazing bird, Xianzhe praised. She then finally thought of an important question and asked, "Where is this place? Your brain circuit is a little long. I thought you didn't care." "This is China, a place very far away from Dayo," Ren Baqin ridiculed before explaining. "Oh." Xianzhe responded and returned to her previous tranquil state. Xianzhe's behavior could be said to be the complete opposite of the Empress's when she first came to Earth. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Follow the rules wherever you go. This was Earth, so they had to follow the laws of Earth. Number 1, do not kill. Secondly, the people here were very fragile, and one couldn't use too much force when hitting them. I'll think of these 2 points first, and I'll let you know when I think of the rest. Almost every time he brought someone back, he would explain everything to her first. On Earth, the Aboriginals' worldview was a little skewed. Things that the Aboriginals thought were normal were all illegal and criminal here. After which, Ren Baqin bought a set of clothes for Xianzhe and brought her to get a pair of glasses. 2 hours later, beside Ren Baqin was an intellectual beauty with fluttering long hair. She wore a short skirt, a shirt, and a pair of glasses. Other than her cold expression, she was almost flawless. After putting on the glasses, everything in Xianzhe's eyes finally became clear. It was no longer a blur of outlines. She no longer relied on her senses to feel things. Instead, she could really see everything around her. The sudden change in resolution caused Xianzhe to take off her glasses and look at her surroundings. After repeating this a few times, she finally stopped taking them off and turned to look at her surroundings. What's that? The frost on Xianzhe's face finally melted. She excitedly pointed to a shop with a pink sign that depicted a woman in lingerie. A lingerie shop. Interested? Ren Baqin turned to the Empress and asked, "Zixiao, do you want to buy lingerie?" "Sure," the Empress replied casually. Xianzhe looked at the Empress in surprise. She didn't expect Ren Baqin to call her by her name. She then pointed to another shop and asked, "What about that?" "A clothing shop. Didn't we just go there?" "What's that?" "A house, or rather, a tall building. The building is divided into many rooms. There are actually so many people. The ground is paved with stones. Why don't I see any seams?" Without waiting for Ren Baqin to answer, Xianzhe looked up at the sky. "Where's the sun? I've been wanting to see it for a long time. Why don't I see any birds?" "Don't look first. Go in." Ren Baqin pushed open the door of the lingerie shop. The Empress skillfully picked out more than 10 pieces of lingerie. Ren Baqin said to Xianzhe, who was curious about everything, "You picked 2 pieces too. What are you doing?" "Wearing, inside." Ren Baqin gestured. "Oh. What should I pick then?" Xianzhe looked at the dazzling lineup of lingerie shops with a blank face. Ren Baqin admired Xianzhe's dazed and helpless expression. Soon after, he calmly picked out a few pieces of white lingerie and underwear and told the salesperson, "D for the bras and 65 for the waist." "How did you know the size of her lingerie? Have you seen it before?" The Empress appeared beside him and asked suspiciously. "Intuition. My intuition has always been accurate." Ren Baqin's expression didn't change. This kind of question was child's play to him and didn't cause any ripples in his heart. The Empress gritted her teeth and gave him a look that said, "Are you bluffing me?" The salesperson had a weird look on her face. When she saw Rinpochen picking out lingerie for the bespectacled beauty, she thought that she was his girlfriend. She didn't expect that the circle of the rich was indeed messy. I haven't seen you before either. Didn't I buy it back then? I've never heard you say that the size was wrong. Rinpochen beamed with joy. Sure enough, I'm born with talent. A man needs to have some talent. The Empress's face immediately turned from white to red, all the way to her ears. Bang! Chapter 657. The three of them strolled along the street. Rinpochen and the Empress walked side by side while Xianzhe silently followed behind. After the short period of excitement after putting on the glasses, Xianzhe returned to her original silent self. She just kept looking at everything around her. The blue sky, the white clouds, the birds, the people, the cars. Everything was fresh and full of temptation in her eyes. Rinpochen was alone with two exceptional beauties, and the gazes of passers-by made his vanity burst. This kind of mentality didn't exist in Deo, but it would always appear on earth. Not returning home after becoming rich was like walking at night in brocade clothes. This was his hometown. Whether it was the knowledge of everything, the three outlooks, the way of thinking, or the similar growth experiences of everyone, everything indicated that this was his hometown. As a result, such a situation occurred here. He couldn't wait to let the whole world know that the person beside him was his fiancée. There. There. The Empress suddenly stopped in her tracks and stared at a spot. In particular, the alluring aroma coming from that direction made her unable to move. Rinpochen twitched his nose. He didn't need to look to know what the Empress had taken a fancy to. The cake shop. After a while, when the three of them came out of the cake shop, the Empress was carrying a large pile of desserts and throwing them into her mouth as she walked. Xianzhe was taking small bites of a cake and measuring how much was left with her fingers as she ate. It was as if she was afraid that she would finish it in 2 or 3 bites. However, behind them, the cake shop was very busy. Half of the cake shop was packed and ready to be sent to the villa. An aboriginal could support a restaurant, and the Empress could support a restaurant and 2 dessert shops. Why can't you make it? The Empress threw the cake into her mouth with one hand and poked Rinpochen's arm with the other. She always felt that it was a pity that she could only eat such delicacies on earth. It would be great if Deo had them as well. I can do anything except giving birth. Rinpochen laughed. It wasn't too difficult to learn how to make cakes, but he hadn't thought about it in the past. However, being the husband of the Empress wasn't a job that an ordinary person could do. He had to understand physics and chemistry, understand industrial and commercial affairs, have the strength of an earth-will expert, and be able to cook, roast meat, and make pastries. Rinpochen thought about it and felt that he was really an all-rounder. Why didn't I realize how outstanding I was in the past? At the side, the Empress scanned Rinpochen's body, looking for a place to attack. After searching for a long time, she simply stuck out her finger and poked Rinpochen's waist. Immediately, Rinpochen's entire body felt sore and numb. Like a piece of wood, he fell forward stiffly. In the end, the Empress grabbed him by the neck and carried him away. Xianzhe was watching the movements of the two of them from behind. Her eyeballs followed their movements, then she lowered her head to stare at the Empress's heels and blindly followed behind. The next day, Rinpochen had just finished making breakfast and placed it on the table when he received a call and rushed out excitedly. "Brother! I'm here to seek shelter from you." At the high-speed rail station, Rinwanyan threw the package aside and gave Rinpochen a hug. "I happen to be short of manpower. You came at the right time." Rinpochen smiled and patted him on the shoulder. "I've grown taller. You're already a senior, do you have a girlfriend?" "Yes." Rinwanyan smiled in high spirits. Did you bring it? Let me take a look. Ren Baqin laughed heartily. Coming. Ren Wanyan took a step back and shouted to the side, Qing Yun. This is my brother. Ren Baqin turned around and saw a pretty lady with long hair. She was about 1.65 meters tall and wore an aqua blue dress. She looked rather gentle and quiet. She smiled shyly at Ren Baqin and said, Hello. This is Zhou Qingyun, my girlfriend. Ren Wanyan put his arm around her shoulder and showed off. Well, get in the car first. Ren Baqin called out to the two of them. Is this an AI? Ren Wanyan got into the car and looked at the dashboard with excitement. Like it? Take it. I rarely use it anyway. Ren Baqin smiled casually. Forget it. I'm a student, and I'm not suitable to drive such a good car. Ren Wanyan shook his head. Don't treat yourself as a student in the future. You have to act like you're doing things here. Furthermore, the people you'll interact with in the future will be different from those you interacted with when you were a student. You still have to have some similar outfits. I don't need to care about these things, but you should. After all, clothes make the man. Ren Baqin said. Got it. I'll learn well. Ren Wanyan nodded. I'm not asking you to learn. I'm asking you to do it now. However, someone will help you. While Ren Baqin and Ren Wanyan were talking, Zhou Qingyun looked at Ren Baqin curiously from the back seat. She knew that her boyfriend's family conditions weren't bad, but they weren't considered wealthy. Ren Wanyan never said much, and she didn't ask in detail. She had always felt that his family was at most wealthy, similar to her own family. However, judging from the tone of this brother, he didn't seem like an ordinary person. Just saying that he didn't need to care about his appearance wasn't something that an ordinary person could do. At the very least, it had to be someone of considerable status to say such words. The car drove all the way back to the villa. Ren Baqin and Ren Wanyan chatted along the way, and Zhou Qingyun, who was in the back, also understood some things. It seemed that her boyfriend's brother wanted to start a martial arts company. Although she didn't know much about this, she knew that taekwondo, sanda, and karate were much more popular than martial arts nowadays. She didn't know if there was a future in this industry. However, no matter what, it was a good internship opportunity for a fourth-year student. However, when she entered the villa and looked out of the window, she was a little stunned. There were 2 flagpoles in the courtyard, and a tightly tied man was hanging from the flagpoles. What was going on? There were also huge men in the courtyard exercising with huge barbells. Each of them was like a fierce star, exuding a fierce aura from head to toe. She felt as if she had come to a terrible place. Although Ren Wanyan's brother looked very valiant, she didn't think much about it before. However, with these fierce faces and people exuding an unapproachable aura from head to toe, she couldn't help but think more. She felt that she was a little lamb stepping into a wolf's den. Ren Wanyan's brother. Could he be a gangster? Didn't they say that there were no gangsters in China? Or was he involved in some illegal business like loan sharks? Were these people all thugs? Brother, this is... Ren Wanyan saw the man hanging on the flagpole earlier than her and couldn't help but ask. Just a small lesson. Some people won't learn their lesson if they don't do it. Ren Baqin's plain words made Zhou Qingyun quiver. Was this the legendary lynching? Ren Wanyan's brother didn't look like a good person. No matter how you looked at him, he looked like a violent person. No, she had to persuade him at night. She couldn't let him follow in his brother's footsteps. Identify the house first. I'm afraid you will come here often in the future. I will get someone to send you to the hotel tonight, Ren Baqin said. Okay. Ren Wanyan nodded. In any case, he would listen to whatever his brother said and definitely wouldn't cheat him. Renbochin got out of the car and shouted at the winged cavalry warrior, "Let him down." Although he wanted to hang him until he left, his younger brother and his younger brother's girlfriend were still around. It wasn't good to hang him up there, so Renbochin decided to spare him. One of the winged cavalry warriors walked over and broke the rope. Su Wei, who was hanging on the flagpole, suddenly fell in a free fall. With a weight of more than 150 kilograms and a height of about 10 meters, the entire ground shook when he fell. Chapter 658. Falling from a height of 10 meters and being tied up tightly, a free fall with his body and face on the ground would have severely injured an ordinary person even if he didn't die. However, for a winged cavalry warrior, it was no different from falling while walking. The next second, Su Wei jumped up from the ground. The moment he jumped, the ropes that were tightly tied around his body broke and fell to the ground. He could break these ropes at any time if he wanted to. However, after breaking them, he reckoned that he would really be hung up to dry. Su Wei took out the wooden ball from his mouth and spat a few times. Then, he looked at Renbochin with a hidden bitterness and said, "Lady boss, I'm hungry." For a day and a night, he listened to others eating meat and drinking wine while he was exposed to the cold wind and basked in the sun. This feeling was really sour. "Get lost, go find your own food," Renbochin scolded jokingly. Su Wei received the order and teleported to the front of the villa like a rabbit. He opened the door and rushed over. 3 seconds later, he smashed through the glass and flew out with a big shoe print on his face. "Call for takeout yourself." Renbochin threw the phone to Su Wei, turned around, and said to Ren Wanyan and Zhou Qingyun, "Let's go." Zhou Qingyun's eyes were wide open when the winged cavalry warrior jumped up from the ground. When he teleported to the door, she couldn't even close her mouth. In the end, he smashed through the window and flew out with a big shoe print on his face. These scenes made Zhou Qingyun's brain tremble. What exactly was going on? Ren Wanyan pushed her a few times before she came back to her senses. "Let's go." "Why are you in a daze?" "Oh, okay." Zhou Qingyun felt that she must have been distracted just now, so she didn't see how that person appeared at the door in an instant. As for other things, such as how he fell from a height of 10 meters without any injuries and how the rope broke, she didn't want to think about them. She followed Ren Wanyan into the house with a blank face. "Sister-in-law." Ren Wanyan's eyes lit up as soon as he entered the room. The Empress shifted her gaze from the television and nodded slightly as a greeting. Although it was a little cold, Ren Wanyan was used to the Empress's coldness during the New Year, so he didn't mind. However, when he saw the Empress, he was more or less a little reserved. Very few people could behave freely in front of the Empress, let alone him. Zhou Qingyun's heart skipped a beat when she saw the woman in red sitting on the sofa. There was actually such a beautiful woman, especially her temperament. She gave off the feeling of the snowy peaks of Kunlun. She was both proud and otherworldly. Was this his sister-in-law? There was also the white-clothed woman standing behind them. Although her appearance and temperament couldn't compare to the red-clothed woman, she was still much better than those celebrities on TV. He didn't know who she was. "Sit." Renbochin pointed to the sofa. "In a while, I will introduce you to a few people. In the future, you can look for them if you need anything." Renbochin sat beside the Empress, grabbed her popcorn, and threw it into his mouth. "All right." Ren Wanyan replied obediently. He then looked at Xianzhe and asked, "This is?" "She's a colleague, you don't have to worry about her." Renbochin waved his hand. "Brother, this can't be real, right?" Ren Wanyan suddenly noticed that there was a pile of firearms behind the sofa. There were pistols, submachine guns, and even grenades. He was immediately shocked. "It's fake," Renbochin replied casually. However, neither of them believed him. There were still bullets in the magazine scattered on the floor. Even a fool wouldn't think that they were fake. Zhou Qingyun's brain started to tremble again. She was already convinced that she had fallen into a wolf's den. This place was more dangerous than a wolf's den. Would she be silenced after seeing these things? At the thought of this, her face turned pale, and she didn't even dare to breathe heavily. She was afraid that others would notice this place. Ren Baqian noticed that her face had turned pale. He immediately knew what was going on. These things could easily scare ordinary people. Don't think too much. You may not know that I'm a member of a state agency, but I won't reveal the specific department. It's just like how you wouldn't find it strange when you see those policemen with guns. Ren Baqian smiled kindly. Zhou Qingyun finally relaxed a little and forced a smile. However, when she saw the bullet holes everywhere on the surrounding walls and the bloodstains that hadn't been wiped clean, she began to feel like she was sitting on pins and needles again. Other people's emotions were at most like riding a roller coaster, going up and down. Her mood was like the stock market, going down again and again as if there was no end to it. After that, Ren Baqian called in the winged cavalry warriors who were outside. More than a dozen burly men stood there, almost all of them bare-chested with scars, giving Ren Wanyan and Zhou Qingyun a lot of pressure. Ren Baqian first told Ren Wanyan the names of these people. Ren Wanyan had seen a few of them before, but he didn't expect there to be so many of them in Ren Baqian's villa. Ren Baqian then said with a fierce face, "This is my younger brother. In the future, if anyone asks him to drink with me, I will kill him." "Understood, Lady Boss." The group of burly men laughed heartily and loudly replied. "Get lost." Ren Baqian laughed and scolded them. In any case, he probably couldn't get rid of the title of Lady Boss. However, he would get used to it after a while. Just treat it as a nickname. While Ren Baqian was cooking, Ren Wanyan walked around the villa. Everything else was fine and within the normal range. However, when they saw the supermarket, they were a little surprised. There were many rich people who bought villas, but this was probably the only one who opened a supermarket in their own home. Zhou Qingyun could only tell herself that this was another strange hobby of rich people. At noon, they witnessed the terrifying appetites of Ren Baqian, the Empress, and Enchanting. In the afternoon, Shen Feng, Ding Jia, and the two hired warriors arrived one after another. The two warriors were surnamed Lu. The eldest brother was Lu Qingwen, and the second brother was Lu Qingwu. Their ancestral home was the hometown of martial arts. They were somewhat famous in the martial arts world, but they weren't very glamorous. Ren Baqian saw that the two of them were somewhat useful. After training the winged cavalry warriors, he hired them as nominal consultants. Although the two of them had been scared to death by the winged cavalry during their time in the villa, they were considered to have found a powerful backer. In the future, they wouldn't have to worry about food and clothing, and they could even learn a thing or two from the winged cavalry warriors. Naturally, they were very happy about this. Ren Baqian introduced these people to Ren Wanyan one by one as a greeting and arranged the following matters. The only interlude was that Ren Wanyan mistook Shen Feng for a man and even called her brother Shen. This made Shen Feng a little unhappy. Although she always dressed in a gender-neutral manner, she didn't really like being mistaken for a man. Especially after being slapped to the wall by the winged cavalry, she finally realized that being a woman had its benefits. "Boss, aren't you going to dispose of these guns? There's no point in keeping them here, and they might get into trouble," Shen Feng asked before leaving. "Just find a room and throw them inside." "Will anyone come to investigate?" Ren Baqian looked indifferent. Not to mention that he was currently on a honeymoon with the nation. Even if he were to fall out with them one day, it wouldn't be because of this. The munitions given to him by the Messier 87 department were enough to blow up a small city. Also, let them see if there are any broken skulls and the like. If the housekeepers saw it, it would be easy to scare them. You guys are too cruel. I heard that the heads of the dead are like the scene of a car accident. Shenfeng bent over and used her fingers to pick out a fingernail-sized piece of broken bone with blood, flesh, and hair from the crack of the cabinet at the door. She looked disgusted. Ren Wanyan and Zhou Qingyun's faces stiffened on the spot, and the sweat on their foreheads dripped down layer by layer. Boss, I'm leaving first. Shenfeng threw the piece of skull on the shoe cabinet at the side and went out with a smile on her face. Scaring the two of them was considered a small revenge, and she felt much better. However, while Shenfeng was happy, Ren Wanyan and Zhou Qingyun weren't happy at all. If they were in another place, they definitely wouldn't believe it. However, with the guns on the ground, bullet holes, and bloodstains all over the wall, they couldn't tell themselves that it was fake even if they wanted to. Brother! Ren Wanyan broke out in a cold sweat. She was just teasing you too. It's a cow bone. Ren Baqian's expression didn't change at all, completely ignoring the fact that there was still some golden hair on that piece of bone. Regardless of whether the two of them believed it or not, he believed it anyway. For the next 2 days, Ren Baqian was busy with the affairs of the martial arts center and didn't know that Ren Wanyan had an argument with his girlfriend after arriving at the hotel that day. As for the reason, it was because of Ren Wanyan's work here. Even though Ren Baqian said that he was a member of the government, looking at those thuggish men, looking at the room full of weapons, and looking at the piece of skull with hair on it, Zhou Qingyun felt deeply uneasy. Chapter 659. A few days after Ren Baqian returned to Dayo, he finally saw the egg-kicking maniac, Li Fu. He looked the same as before and didn't seem to be in dire straits. He wasn't missing an arm or a leg. It seemed like his first parachute jump was a success, and the Empress's advancement to the third most powerful expert in the world had to be delayed. Li Fu was also riding a Heilang Jun, a wild boar that was 3 to 4 meters tall. It was covered in short, grayish-brown hair and emitted energy waves that weren't weaker than an earth will expert. With this kind of strength, Heilang Jun could be considered an overlord in the forest. No animals dared to provoke it, and beasts of the same level had to avoid it. However, this fellow was a little miserable at the moment. His fangs were broken in half, his 2 small eyes were of different sizes, and there was a bump on his forehead. The hair on the back of his neck had also been pulled out, making him look miserable. However, his ferocity didn't diminish at all, and his eyes glowed fiercely at everyone he saw. Then, Li Fu punched him in the head, causing him to scream in pain. Li Fu jumped down from the Heilang Jun and casually said, "I'll give it to you." As soon as Li Fu jumped down, the Heilang Jun turned to run, but a few of Ren Baqian's guards immediately surrounded it. This Heilang Jun wasn't weak and had a huge body. If it recklessly charged around in the city, it would probably hurt a lot of people. Shi was the first to punch the Heilang Jun on the head. As a result, Shi was sent flying and smashed into the wall of Shi Qing's residence. Ren Baqian smacked his lips. Ever since the establishment of this academy, the walls of Shi Qing's residence seemed to have been demolished a few times. As expected, a few burly men jumped out of the Shi residence to argue with Shi. Shi was held down by them just as he was about to get up from the pile of rubble. He was immediately enraged and almost fought with them again. Fortunately, the egg-kicking maniac and Heilang Jun were still there to take the blame, so the matter was settled. Meanwhile, the battle between the man and the pig continued. Although the Heilang Jun was also at the earth will level, it was much stronger than the aboriginals. Coupled with its thick skin and flesh, it took the guards a lot of effort to break all 4 of its legs and pin it to the ground. "Sir, what should we do with it?" Shi asked Ren Baqian as he vented his anger by punching it repeatedly on its head. "Send them back to the palace, kill them, and eat their meat," Ren Baqian said casually. It wasn't easy to find this kind of earth will level livestock. Their bodies contained a lot of blood essence, and it would be good to eat as a supplement. He Langjun seemed to be able to hear Renbachian's words and began to struggle violently again. Unfortunately, all 4 of his legs had been broken and his struggles were futile. He was once again beaten up by the guards and carried back to the palace. How does it feel to be in the sky? Renbachian turned around and smiled at Li Fu. He carefully sized up Li Fu and found that he was in a good state of mind and had a ruddy complexion. Although it's higher than the highest mountain peak, it's still too low, and the time is too short. I didn't see anything. If it's a little higher, with a little more time, maybe we'll find something, Li Fu said bluntly. But it feels pretty good. This is the first time I've felt so close to the sky. If you say that you can make something better, then this old man will wait for you. However, you have to be quick. This old man has waited for so many years, and I can't wait any longer. When I was in the sky, I felt the excitement that I hadn't felt in a long time. Even my heart felt younger. I always thought how good it would be if I could fly. Li Fu said with a yearning look on his face. In fact, even if you flew higher, you probably wouldn't be able to see anything unless you used a rocket to fly. Then, you would be able to see a big ball. Renbachian thought to himself, but didn't say it out loud. Instead, he smiled and said, I'm afraid that you will have to wait. It's mainly due to various restrictions, and it's very difficult to improve greatly in a short period of time. If you can destroy the Yun nation, it will be faster. Dayo's resources are too little. Li Fu rejected him without hesitation. I can't do that. If you are willing, I can bring you to Great Xia. I have an old relationship with Xia Bailong's grandfather, and he will give me some face. The grass on Xia Bailong's grave is already 15 meters tall. Renbachian was speechless. This news had been spreading like wildfire in Lon City some time ago. Wasn't this news a little too out of touch? That little fellow is dead. However, it doesn't matter. As long as the successor is his descendant, he will give me some face. Li Fu stroked his beard. The problem is that I don't intend to give you face. Renbachian rolled his eyes, turned around, and walked back into the academy. Li Fu chuckled, didn't take it seriously, and disappeared in a flash. In the afternoon, there was a very important matter to attend to in the academy. After more than 2 months, with the combined efforts of 40 to 50 students and 6 to 7 blacksmiths, the locomotive was finally completed. According to Renbachian's request, the backyard of the academy had already laid out 50 meters of rails, or rather, light rails. Each meter of the rails weighed 50 kilograms, and both sides added up to 100 kilograms, which was far lower than the standard of rails. These rails were made from all the iron ingots in the academy. In the afternoon, both the old and new students were waiting in the backyard of the academy. More than 100 people were scattered in the courtyard, but it wasn't considered crowded. In front of them was the 50-meter-long rail with a slight curve, and above it was a locomotive that looked more like a tractor. It was still a barrel-shaped steam engine. Below it were 2 rows of metal wheels of different sizes and metal arms of various sizes. There wasn't even a carriage at the back, only a stove for adding fire. It took more than 2 months to build this thing, and most of the time was spent on the metal arms of the wheels. This time, it was more complicated than the previous time, and it was almost completely redesigned. Let's begin, Renbachian said. Then, like the previous time, they started a fire, added coal, and added water. After a while, the cigarette butt above the locomotive emitted bursts of black smoke, and the train began to move slowly. Success! Many students cheered and clapped excitedly. Although they had succeeded the last time, they were traveling on rails this time, and all the components had been replaced with metal. Before the start, many students were still nervous and afraid that something would go wrong. Fortunately, everything went smoothly at this time, and no problems occurred. Everyone was relieved. In particular, when they saw the locomotive drawing an arc along the rails in the courtyard and getting faster and faster, the smiles on everyone's faces grew wider and wider, and their faces were full of pride. "Is there a break this time?" Renbochin suddenly asked. "What's a break?" Shirgan asked. "How do we stop?" Renbochin pointed at the locomotive and asked. Shirgan, everyone. Then, the locomotive left the rails, smashed through the courtyard wall, crossed the street, and smashed through the wall of Shirqing's house. Finally, it fell to the ground with a loud bang. The students rushed over like a swarm of bees. Then, they heard Shirqing's angry voice in the courtyard, "It's you guys again. Sixth uncle, listen to my explanation." Shirgan pulled the arm of a burly man and shouted, "Hurry up and carry him back." "What explanation?" "Just wait to be beaten up." The burly man picked Shirgan up like a chick and shook him in the air. Suddenly, a small round mirror, 2 metal rods, a handkerchief, and a money bag fell to the ground. When Renbochin arrived, Shirqing stood there with his hands on his waist, smiled kindly at Renbochin and said, "Do you have a grudge against my wall? You dismantled it in the morning, and now you're doing it again. Maybe the feng shui of your courtyard isn't very good." Renbochin said seriously. Chapter 660. The locomotive experiment was a success. Renbochin sent the students to research the deceleration and braking system for the locomotive while he went to the Empress to ask for another 5,000 kilograms of iron. The next goal was to build a circular railway track with a diameter of 400 meters outside Lan City. After all, it wasn't enough for the train to run. There were still other aspects that needed to be tested, such as its load capacity, speed, and so on. Dayo wasn't rich in iron resources. It was impossible to build a long railway track at the moment. The circular railway track was the best choice. However, this time around, Renbochin wanted to make a standard rail that weighed 50 kilograms per meter. The two sides would be equivalent to a circular rail that was 20 meters per meter. The circumference would be 1,300 meters, which was equivalent to 23,000 kilograms. This was the output of Dayo in the past 4 months. In the next few days, there was inevitably a quarrel in the imperial court. Even though it was all thanks to Renbochin that Mount Damo could produce 1.8 million kilograms of iron per year, Dayo's current shortfall was too big. Everyone wasn't optimistic about the project that the academy was working on. Or rather, it was a waste of bricks. She liked the feel of bricks more and more. Ever since she had this magical weapon, the Empress had never missed her target. She found great joy in it. Now, the Empress used about a cart of bricks every week, and this consumption rate was still increasing. With the iron mine, manpower was still needed. Renbochin asked Tong Jinye to make the grinding tools and molded the railway track. He also brought 1,000 prisoners from the prisoner camp to lay the roadbed with gravel, lay the ties, and lay the railway track. It took a full 20 days to lay the ties and start laying the railway track. Renbochin didn't stay idle during this period of time. On one hand, he planned to expand the academy. On the other hand, he started to build the library of the Black Bamboo Residence, which was also the first library in Dayo. After all, Renbochin still had a large number of secret manuals. It would be a waste to leave them in the warehouse to rot. There was no harm in letting these students take a look. The construction of the library was very fast. It was completed in less than 20 days. In any case, it was an ordinary brick building with 3 floors and an area of more than 400 square meters. Inside, there were wooden bookshelves, tables, and chairs. Other than these, there were no other decorations. From the outside, it looked simple and crude. However, the value of this library was immeasurable in Dayo. Most of the imperial court officials in Dayou only had a collection of a few dozen books. Some of them only had a few hundred books, let alone the commoners. In this library, Rinpoche had placed tens of thousands of books that covered all aspects. It was something that no other book collection could compare to, and it was enough to excite everyone. The third level contained all kinds of secret manuals that were brought back from Tianjin Basin and some unimportant martial arts that the Empress had collected. Although it wasn't too important, it was still a pretty good cultivation technique for commoners. Although the Aboriginals had great potential, they also faced the same problem as the ancient Chinese. It was very difficult to obtain knowledge, especially when it came to things like martial arts manuals. On the one hand, the secret manuals collected by the library could be used as a reference for students. On the other hand, it could also benefit many commoner disciples. The second floor was filled with professional books that Rinpoche had brought back from Earth, including physics, chemistry, manufacturing, Western medicine, business, and even the Analects of Confucius and Tao Te Ching. As for the first floor, there were some miscellaneous books, but it was precisely these books that made the students unable to move their feet. The books in the library could only be read in the library and could not be taken out. However, this didn't dampen the enthusiasm of the students. Ever since the news of the construction of the library spread, these students began to look forward to it, and quite a few of them came to Rinpoche to inquire about it. It even spread outside the academy and into the ears of some court officials. These students waited for more than 20 days and immediately rushed in on the opening day. Many students rushed to the secret manuals on the third floor, especially the commoner disciples, as they could still find a lot of things that were useful to them. However, someone quickly found the key to open the door to a new world on the first floor. The Pirate King. Why are there drawings inside? This person's drawings are also quite strange. Half an hour later, this thing is quite interesting. A day later, a short new student came to Rinpoche and said, "Teacher, I want to drop out of school." What happened? Rinpoche was a little surprised. Tell me about it. I'm your principal after all, and maybe I can help you solve it. In other words, there weren't many things that he couldn't solve in Dayou. Although this young man wasn't considered outstanding in all aspects, Rinpoche really didn't want his students to leave for inexplicable reasons. I want to pursue my dreams. Rinpoche had a strange look on his face. Why did the word dreams sound so strange coming from the mouth of an Aboriginal? I want to go to the Yun Nation, I want to steal a ship, I want to go out to sea, and I want to be the Pirate King. The young man clenched his fists and shouted with a serious look on his face. Rinpoche's eyes twitched as he looked at the other party's serious face. He silently took out the Type 81 rifle from under the table, pointed it at the young man, and said, "I'll give you another chance to organize your words." Sometimes, life was very interesting, especially when one looked back after a period of time. Many years later, when this young man became the commander of Dayou's navy, Rinpoche felt that today was particularly interesting. Sometimes, a person's future was decided by a small thought when they were young. At this time, Rinpoche still felt that this young man was interesting. However, when he saw another person the next day, he began to feel that in this era without any entertainment, comics were too impactful and had a greater impact on students than he had imagined. The next day, when Rinpoche came to class, he felt that something was wrong. After carefully looking for a long time, he finally found what was wrong: several shiny bald heads. Bald heads were common in Dayou. On one hand, the weather was hot, and on the other hand, many men shaved their heads to save trouble. However, there were many bald heads in the classroom today, and one of them surprised him. Underneath the bald head was a very beautiful face. "Shuohua, what's with your hair?" Rinpoche asked as he placed his hands on the table. Aboriginal women either tied their hair in a bun or combed it into a small braid. Being bald was quite unusual. I suddenly felt like shaving. Shuohua blushed and looked away. What exactly is the reason? Renbachian had a bad premonition, and his face darkened. It is said that you can become stronger this way. Someone beside him whispered. Pft. Pft. Many people snickered. Renbachian was speechless. Sit down. Do you think the stories in those picture books are true? Renbachian didn't reprimand these students and asked seriously. I believe it. That kind of thing is happening in a corner of the world. Otherwise, where did those picture books come from? Someone immediately stood up and said with a serious expression. It was the teenager who wanted to go out to sea to become a pirate king yesterday. I think, maybe, it's true. What if it's true? Someone else said. Regardless of whether it's true or not, it's pretty interesting. I hope it's true. Renbachian looked at the answers of these students and pondered. Those comics had a greater impact than he thought. These students hadn't been exposed to many things and hadn't been exposed to any entertainment. Comics had never appeared in this world before. He originally wanted to show these comics to entertain the students and expand their imaginations. He didn't expect so many students to be influenced and even believe it was real. People on Earth could be exposed to all kinds of information from a young age and could easily distinguish between stories and reality. However, children on Earth would also have thoughts of becoming Ultraman, Super Saiyan, Sun Wukong, Calabash Brothers. Renbachian recalled that when he was young, he always wanted to be the sixth child. These students had just come into contact with such new things, so it wasn't incomprehensible for them to have such a situation. It seemed like he still had to let them come into contact with more things in order to have the ability to distinguish between things. Perhaps he should make a newspaper or something, such as the Lawn City Daily. On one hand, it would allow these students to train, and on the other hand, it would provide some entertainment for the people of Lawn City. At the same time, he could control a mouthpiece. Chapter 661. Shanghai, Jing and Renren Martial Arts Dojo. A pair of students were sparring on the arena in the dojo. There were more than 10 people watching, and 7 or 8 people were hitting sandbags a little further away. Coach, I heard that a new dojo opened nearby. It's opening today, said a bare-chested young man in shorts. The other person was a well-built man in his 30s. He sat on a chair and glanced at the 2 people in the arena from time to time. Oh. The well-built man nodded nonchalantly. They teach them, and we teach us. There were at least 80 if not 100 famous dojos in Shanghai. There were even more if you included karate, taekwondo, and the like. This did not include the small dojos that opened one day and closed the next. There were quite a few families in the vicinity that could be called out by their names, and all of them minded their own business. Things were different now. There were not as many challengers when a new dojo opened. After all, smashing someone's signboard was equivalent to cutting off their source of income. It was a deadly feud. No one would do such a thing if there was no grudge between them. At most, they would occasionally interact with each other when their skills were similar. But that was mostly what students did. But this dojo is quite strange. Usually, there would be some advertising before opening, but this dojo didn't do anything. It's 3 floors, and the rent is 2 to 3 million a year. I don't know how they earn that much, the young man said casually. That's their business. You're telling me this for a reason, aren't you? The well-built man turned to look at him. There was a glint in his eyes, which made the young man's heart pound. Coach, I think Shui and the others went to look for trouble, the young man said softly. The well-built man frowned. Shui and the others were in a small circle of 5. They were all between the ages of 17 and 20, and they all came from good families. Among them, Shuai had been training here the longest. He had trained here for 5 years and liked to fight. He had even sparred with a few taekwondo and karate instructors. However, the ones he sparred with were all from big dojos. They had come back to teach children and were not very skilled. Now that he had grown bolder, he actually went to challenge others. Did he think he was good enough after winning a few times? Those small taekwondo dojos that were only a few dozen square meters couldn't compare with those small taekwondo dojos that could rent a few million yuan a year. He would not be a match for any 1 or 2 coaches. "Coach, do you want to take a look? In any case, he's from our dojo." "I'm afraid he'll lose face," the young man said. "What's there to see? If he loses, it's because he's not skilled enough, and if he loses face, he's the one who loses face," the robust man said. He didn't think that a student who had only trained for a few years could compete with an instructor from a big martial arts school, even if the student was talented. They weren't on the same level at all. 2 streets away from Renren Martial Arts School, there was an ancient martial arts school with a wooden exterior wall. At the bottom of the sign was a small, Wu character. There was also an unrecognizable character above it. It looked like Xiaozhuan. Some busybodies nearby studied it for a long time, but they could not figure out what it was. Later, when they saw the people from the martial arts club, someone asked if it was the word Yao. However, no one knew which dynasty the word came from. Many people thought it was a self-made word, and they even laughed at it. At that moment, a few robust young men walked into the martial arts club, laughing. What was surprising was that in addition to the luxuriously decorated hall, reception, and a few rooms on the first floor, there was also a restaurant. "Is this a martial arts club or a restaurant?" a short-haired young man asked with a grin. "Of course it's a martial arts club. That's where the internal students eat." The receptionists were 2 girls in their 20s. They looked delicate and pretty, and they answered politely. "What do you teach?" the young man asked with a smile. "Currently, there's only one fist technique, the fist of death," the girl replied. "Fist of death? That's a scary name. It won't kill people, right?" The young man next to her suddenly laughed. "But I've never heard of it. Can you show it to us? Do you want to sign up?" the girl asked. "Let's see what we're capable of before deciding whether to sign up or not. Girl, call your coach out to talk to me. If he wins, I'll sign up. What do you think?" Another bronze-skinned, burly, and fierce-looking young man said in a deep voice. Ren Baqian was sitting on the 3rd floor, listening to Ren Wanyan and Ding Jie's reports. He was a little surprised to suddenly hear someone reporting to him. Someone is here to cause trouble. Ren Baqian, Ren Wanyan, and Ding Jia were all surprised, and their expressions became strange. To challenge here. How stupid must they be? Yes, the other party said it's an exchange, but it should be a challenge, the receptionist who came to report said. She was a little nervous facing this big boss whom she met for the first time. The main thing was that this big boss didn't look like a good person. He gave her the same feeling as the 2 great coaches in the martial arts club, and he had an intimidating aura. Is there such a thing nowadays? Ren Baqian asked, finding it a little funny. I've asked around, and it's very rare now. Moreover, we just opened for business and haven't done any advertising. It's impossible to affect others or attract hostility, Ding Jia said. After more than half a year of busy work, Ding Jia had matured a lot. In addition, he had been practicing martial arts these days, and his body had become stronger. He looked like a promising young man in his 20s, no longer a bean sprout like he used to be. This change was tangible. He knew that he wasn't outstanding in any way, and there were a lot of people who were stronger than him. Although he didn't know why the boss liked him and gave him such an opportunity, he had to redouble his efforts. Therefore, Ding Jia strived to do everything to the best of his ability. Bring them to the second floor and call the few coaches along the way. Ren Baqian smiled, stood up, and walked out of the door. Since he had nothing to do, it wasn't bad to watch some fun. After a while, Ren Baqian and the others saw 5 young men being brought up. They were all 17 or 18 years old, the age where they would stir up trouble. Seeing these people, Ren Baqian immediately lost most of his interest. As soon as the 5 youths came up, they saw 7 or 8 people standing there, especially 2 of them who looked like human bears. They were immediately shocked. If such people stood there and let them hit them, they might not even be able to move them. However, since they were already here, they couldn't just admit defeat. At 17 or 18 years old, their reputation was more important than the sky. In order to fight for their reputation, they would stab their brothers from time to time. Moreover, a few of their good friends were watching. One of the young men stepped forward and shouted, "Which one of you is the coach?" "I'm from Renren Martial Arts School. Let's have an exchange." "Boss, let me do it," Lu Qingguo, the second oldest of the Lu brothers, said. Their annual salaries weren't low, but they had nothing to do as consultants. They had always wanted to show their value. Seeing this situation, they immediately volunteered. Ren Baqian nodded. "Are you here for an exchange?" Lu Qingguo stepped forward and asked. The other party was relieved to see Lu Qingguo come out. As long as it wasn't those 2 guys, it was fine. Since the guy who came out looked like he was in his 40s, their chances of winning had greatly increased. "That's right, we are from Renren Martial Arts School," a few of them immediately said. Lu Qingguo nodded and silently walked to a row of sandbags at the side. He casually punched one in the middle, pointed, and said, "The sandbags here are from light to heavy. Which level can you move?" Punching sandbags. Those people immediately laughed and looked down on them. The people from this martial arts school were somewhat cowardly. The young man in the lead walked to the side of the heaviest sandbag, took a deep breath, lifted his leg, and kicked it. Boom! Crack! The crisp sound of a bone breaking was heard. That young man hugged his leg and lay on the ground, wailing in pain. The other people's faces immediately changed. They didn't expect such a situation to happen. "What's in that sandbag?" Ren Baqian turned his head and asked. "Steel ingot." Lu Qingguan replied from behind. Ren Baqian almost burst out laughing. He really didn't expect that the Lu brothers were so black-bellied. They provoked a hot-blooded young man to use all his strength to kick a steel ingot. This kick would make him doubt his life. What a talent! Ren Baqian liked this kind of talent. Chapter 662. It had to be said that the older the ginger, the spicier it was. Nowadays, those who could make a name for themselves in the martial arts circle weren't simple. The Lu brothers seemed to be very quiet, but they easily made Ren Baqian realize what it meant to be awesome. He reckoned that they would have a psychological scar from hitting sandbags for the rest of their lives. Ren Baqian was in a good mood and had a higher opinion of them. Their goal had been achieved. To be honest, they knew that no matter how good they were at fighting, their boss wouldn't think highly of them. There were too many people who could fight. The dozens of people in the villa could poke them to death with one finger and slap them to the wall. This kind of experience was what Ren Baqian valued the most. Ren Baqian's reaction also proved this point. Both sides had forgotten one thing. Ren Baqian's original purpose of hiring them was to teach the winged cavalry warriors martial ethics. It was to teach martial ethics. The other party rushed forward and surrounded their companion. After figuring out the whole story, they immediately jumped up and scolded. Bastards, don't you have any shame? Do you think you are fit to open a martial arts center? F***CK*XXXXX. Renbochin tilted his head, and one of the winged cavalry warriors suddenly became smart. He understood what Renbochin meant and strode over. Every step he took seemed to shake the ground. His huge body gave those people a huge deterrent. They paused for a moment before clamoring again, "You don't dare to fight and play dirty. What do you want now?" They didn't believe that these people could do anything to them now. If they wanted to do anything, they could just call the police and make them suffer. That winged cavalry warrior walked over to them with a contemptuous look on his face, turned around without saying a word, and swept his leg across. Before they could react, that leg swept across the sandbag. Following which, a gust of wind blew across their faces. Boom! A loud sound was heard. The sandbag that had just made the young man's face bloody exploded, and the steel ingots inside shot out like fragments of a cannonball. The visual impact made everyone feel the huge force. Clang, clang, clang. After a series of sounds, the winged cavalry warriors came back to their senses and stared at the scene on the wall. Their faces turned green. The walls were densely embedded with steel ingots that were 3 fingers wide and 2 fingers thick. All of the steel ingots were embedded perfectly straight into the wall, and not the slightest bit was exposed outside. That kick just now didn't seem like a human's kick at all, but a Gundam's kick. Otherwise, how could it have caused such an impact? Everyone's eyes widened and their mouths opened and closed. They were like fish out of water, unable to utter a single word. Bean-sized sweat trickled down their foreheads, and their faces were deathly pale. They looked at the winged cavalry warrior and then at the wall. They uniformly took a step back, carried the young man on the ground, and ran away without saying a word. He didn't dare to say a word. If this kick landed on him, it would be no better than being hit by a truck at 100 miles per hour. The only difference was whether the corpse was whole or not. Not only were they frightened, but even Ren Wanyan and the Liu brothers were horrified. After those youths ran away, the 3 of them looked at the 2 winged cavalry warriors with admiration. "Boss, do we need to do some publicity or something?" Ding Jia asked. With the strength of these mountain kids, it would immediately cause a sensation as long as they did some publicity, such as taking a video of that kick and posting it on the internet. In his mind, this cultural martial arts company could be established all over the country, gain a great reputation, and become a martial arts holy land in the hearts of ordinary people, just like Shaolin. The difference was that other martial arts centers needed a huge amount of energy and money to do so, and people might not necessarily buy it. Here, all they needed was a gentle push from the back. Upon hearing this question, the others pricked up their ears. "There's no hurry. It's not the right time yet. Let's recruit students first. Those who are fated will come." Renbochin shook his head. With the strength of the winged cavalry, as long as someone witnessed it, there would naturally be people coming. They were too strong, and even without any publicity, Renbochin was confident that there would be no shortage of disciples. Just like today's incident, it would definitely be spread out in the future. If they were defeated in an ordinary match, there wouldn't be much to say, and it was even possible for the opponent to slander them after they left. However, that kick from the winged cavalry was far beyond that of a human. Ordinary people who saw this scene were more likely to exaggerate it, and this would make the martial arts center famous. If they were to do more publicity, the martial arts center would probably be overcrowded. The martial arts center had just been established, and the various systems weren't perfect yet. They didn't have enough experience and weren't ready for this. Let's do it bit by bit. After all, Renbochin's martial arts center was completely different from the martial arts centers, taekwondo centers, and karate centers that previously existed. There were too many things involved, and many things had to be carefully considered. Ding Jia and Ren Wanyan were somewhat puzzled and felt that it was a pity. Other martial arts centers were eager to become famous, but Ren Baqin seemed to be afraid of others finding out. However, they would listen to whatever Ren Baqin said. In the future, the disciples will be divided into 3 categories. The first category will be ordinary outer disciples, the second category will be inner disciples with some potential, and the last category will be core disciples, Ren Baqin said. What's the difference in treatment? Ding Jia asked. Ordinary disciples will be taught according to the previous rules. The annual tuition fee will be 50,000 yuan, and they will only be taught boxing techniques to hone their bodies. As for inner disciples, the annual tuition fee will be 20,000 yuan, and they will be taught basic martial arts techniques. As for core disciples, there will be no tuition fee, but they will have to complete missions and exchange points for martial arts techniques, Ren Baqin explained briefly. Ding Jia and Ren Wanyan felt that it was a little strange. They didn't know why Ren Baqin had set up such a system. Core disciples actually didn't need to pay tuition fees, but had to complete missions. What missions? Meanwhile, the Liu brothers focused their attention on the martial arts techniques that Ren Baqin mentioned. Let's leave it at that for now. There are some things that you will understand in the future. Ren Baqin waved his hand. After that, Ren Baqin left and went to another martial arts center in Pudong, which was also overseen by 2 winged cavalry warriors. Different from the previous one, there were actually a few students registered for this martial arts center. Ren Baqin didn't even need to think to know that it must have something to do with some departments. However, it didn't matter as the sand couldn't be washed clean. This time, Ren Baqin opened a total of 2 martial arts centers in Shanghai. They were located in Jing and Pudong, with an area of about 1,000 square meters and an excellent location. In addition to the teaching area, each martial arts center also had a herb room and a dining room. Naturally, the herbs and meat that were brought back from Dayo were helpful for cultivation. Of course, they weren't open to external disciples. However, these 2 points alone made it incomparable to any other place. These things couldn't be bought by others even if they had the money, and Ren Baqin wasn't prepared to sell them. Originally, Ren Baqin was going to build a martial arts center in the capital and a martial arts center in Yang City. However, after careful consideration, he didn't dare to let the winged cavalry warriors out as they might cause trouble. After settling the matters of the martial arts centers, Ren Baqin became a hands-off shopkeeper and left the 2 martial arts centers to Ding Jia and Ren Wanyan to slowly develop. In any case, his request was to let nature take its course. No publicity, no activities, and it didn't matter if they came or not. He returned to Dayo to start building the paper mill. Furthermore, the roadbed and sleepers of the circular railway had already been laid, and Ren Baqin still had to arrange for the laying of the tracks. 260,000 kilograms of steel was equivalent to the steel output of Dayo for the past 3 years. This was the largest expenditure since the founding of the nation. He had to let those people in the imperial court see the results as soon as possible. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.